All right, good evening, everybody. The time is now 7 o'clock and we officially call this meeting to order. Deb, would you kindly take roll?
Counselor Williams
Yes.
and Counselor Hansi is excused absent. Counselor Purser. Counselor Parrish.
Yes.
Counselor Stolarczyk.
Here.
Counselor Miller.
Present.
Great, thank you very much. I'm now going to ask that everybody stand, take a moment of silence to reflect, and then we'll head into the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have an agenda before us. Are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda, Mr. Mayor.
Great.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the agenda as before us.
Second. We have a first and a second. Would you kindly poll council again?
Counselor Williams. Counselor Purser.
Yes.
Counselor Parrish.
Yes.
Counselor Stolarczyk and Counselor Miller.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Great, thank you. Tonight we have one presentation, which is the 2023 financial statements and the physical health analysis and our auditor's report. And our finance director, City Clerk Margaret and Michael Jenkins, managing member for McCannon and Associates LLC are here to present. Hopefully I got that name correct. Oh, I see we have them on Zoom. So who are you heading us up, leading us? Is this your last and final?
Oh my goodness.
The day
Look
has.
how happy she is. She's
I've never seen her get up there that fast.
ready.
We have Michael Jenkins, McMahon and Associates with us online, and he's gonna go over the auditor's reports. Is Michael on there? Okay. And so I think I'll turn it over to him, let him do his audit reports, and then we'll go over the financial statements, presentations.
Right, thank you.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. It is a pleasure to meet with you today. I regret not being able to meet in person just due to a scheduling conflict earlier in the day. But my name is Michael Jenkins. I'm a partner with McMahon and Associates. We're based out of Avon, and I'm very pleased to present to you the results of our audit of the city's 2023 financial statements. 2023 is the first year that we've been doing the city's audit, but just a little bit of background on our firm. It's been in existence since the 60s, and our firm is unique in that it specializes in audit assurance and consulting work, primarily in the local government field. So we're really excited to be working alongside, regrettably, Margaret's departure, but Margaret and Joe and Mike and Shannon and the rest of the city. While the audit itself is a statutory requirement, at law and per charter, it's also a process that provides the city with an independent viewpoint on its financial reporting, and that really ensures that the city is able to provide accountability and transparency to its constituents. Our job as auditors is to provide a professional, independent opinion on the city's financial reports and their compliance with applicable governmental reporting standards. For us to be able to issue our audit opinion, we had an audit manager and 2 staff members come out on site working in January and then coming back again in April. The first visit primarily was just really documenting and understanding how the city's systems work. How does a transaction flow through the various systems so that it ultimately ends up in the financial statements, and going around to the various departments and testing those processes and making sure that our understanding is consistent with how things are working. The latter visit is really to do kind of the traditional exciting auditor stuff that people associate with the ticking and tying, the making sure that what is in the financials is supportable, that it's properly presented, and really making sure that the systems and the balances are properly reported in the financial statements. Ultimately, that the financial statements are reliable. So subsequent to that, we worked with Margaret and Joe just in terms of completing the single audit. The city did receive or expend some federal source dollars last year for the ARPA grant money. So that required a separate audit of the city's use of those funds during the fiscal year, and working with town staff in terms of drafting those reports. So I'm pleased to announce that the city did receive an unmodified or a clean audit opinion for 2023 in respect of both its financial statements and the single audit. And that really is the highest level of assurance that we as independent CPAs, independent auditors, can provide on those that information. Since the city is extremely fortunate, and I would say somewhat unique in terms of the depth of the analysis that Margaret and Joe have put together for you in terms of the fiscal analysis, I'm just going to touch on a couple of financial highlights. I don't want to steal their thunder, but just going to maybe prep you for what's to come. The city is, in 2023, as it has been in prior years, highly liquid, about $37.3 million of cash investments at the end of the year, which is about a quarter of total assets. And that's really consistent with the 2022 fiscal year. The city has a very strong asset base, about $111 million of net capital assets. That's about 70% of total assets, and up about $6 million from the prior year, as current year additions exceeded depreciation for the year. And that really kind of reinforces the city's commitment to investing in, if you will, infrastructure, in those assets that can deliver services to the taxpayers and businesses of the city. On the other side of the balance sheet, if you will, with the new GASB standards that were implemented in the past 2 years with respect to leases and what are called SPITAs, or basically subscription software agreements, the city has had to report those arrangements as a form of liability, again with a corresponding asset. So there were some additions to the long-term liabilities during the past year, but on the whole, there was a $1.2 million decrease in long-term liabilities during the past year as existing debt was paid off per schedule. The city's assets exceeded its liabilities. It's in financial reporting framework that's called net position by some $125 million at the end of 2023. About a quarter of that, or 29.6 million, is unrestricted and therefore available for use in the 2024 fiscal year. About 70% of that amount, or about $88 million, represents the city's equity, if you will, in those capital assets. So the depreciated value of the capital assets less related debt. So again, just reinforcing that commitment to providing services and infrastructure. And there's about $8.6 million that is restricted for TABOR and other related required reserves for the year. That net position or equity increased some $10 million, or about 9%, in the 2023 fiscal year. So it's a strong showing for the fiscal year. The governmental or the day-to-day activities of the city realized about a $5.8 million increase in net position for the year. Like most governments, the costs of the day-to-day activities of the city are really not covered by the fees associated with their directly generated revenues, but rather they're covered by the general revenues, the sales and use tax, property taxes, et cetera, that are generated for the city. Sales and use tax was up about $100,000 last year, about 1% over the prior year. Investment earnings were up significantly last year due to significantly better returns on the city's funds. On the business side of the equation, that would be the sewer, the trash fund, the irrigation water, and Devil's Canyon. Those funds, those activities generated a surplus of about $4 million in the past year. $3.4 million of that, though, can be attributed to capital grants that were received in the sewer fund and therefore were utilized for some of the infrastructure expansion that was done during the past year. When we look at the other viewpoint on the financial statements, the fund level financials as opposed to the government wide, this would be the budget basis reports that you're used to seeing on a regular basis during the fiscal year. Total governmental funds increased about $2 million during 2023. One question we often get is, well, I know that great, we hear that number, but what does that mean? How do we really do? What's the context for that? And one of the best and consistent methods for doing looking at how we did in a particular fiscal year is looking at ending fund balances, governmental fund balances, as a percentage of expenditures in the governmental funds for the past year. So for 2023, ending governmental fund balances were about 160% of 2023 expenditures, and that compares to about 180% in the prior year. Those numbers do fluctuate, certainly depending on the value and the build-up cycle or spend-down cycle within the capital type funds, where there's typically a period where we build up the funds to then expend and invest in capital assets of the city, so that you often see a cycle that is reflected in the financial statement, larger fund balances. It is important that, as in prior years, the city continue to maintain strong governmental fund balances, simply because of the importance of those variable revenue sources, the sales and use taxes, property taxes, franchise fees, things like that, that can vary from year to year. So it's important to have kind of a cushion built up in those governmental funds to be able to kind of withstand some of the variability that might come about as a result of economic circumstances. That certainly then provides the city with the ability to fulfill their future plans and the stability for their operations. In terms of budgetary control, all of the city's major funds performed well during the past year, and expenditures in all the significant major funds were within their adopted budgets. So in just kind of summing up there, pretty solid financial year for 2023, steady revenues, growth in grant funding during the past year, assisted with the capital expenditures, capital construction that took place during the past year, again expanding really the city's ability to provide services for its taxpayers. Fund balances remained healthy. The city continues to remain pretty conservative in its budgeting, and very proactive in adjusting expectations as events unfold, which has been really been the case over the past couple of years for all local governments, and really in controlling costs relative to actual revenues during the year. And this in collectively allows the city to enter 2024 in a pretty strong reserve position in its financial matters. So the council packet also includes, in addition to the audited financial statements, also includes a required letter to you as the governing body of the city that, I guess, what I like to say, it addresses the non-numeric side of the audit. So it talks about the nature and quality of the accounting policies and practices of the city, talks about the extent of adjustments that were made to the city's financial records, any issues we might have had with management in conducting our audit, and also provides a venue to address, opportunities for improving the city's business practices or internal control structure that we may have come across in the course of our audit. As I mentioned earlier, there was a new accounting standard relative to the subscription-based software agreements that was implemented during 2023. It did not, thankfully, involve restating opening balances, but it did involve adding some additional notes, disclosures, and some additional measures to the 2023 package that you see in front of you. In terms of performance of the audit, difficulties of the audit, Margaret, Joe, everybody in the city was great to work with. Very smooth audit. The city, I think, and I think certainly the taxpayers of the city would take great comfort knowing that the people that work for the city take great pride in what they do and in making sure that they do a good job. So I think that's something that, certainly you all as the council should take great comfort in, as should citizens of Fruita. We did have some restatements of opening balances. Thankfully, they were all in the increase or the positive direction. Those relate to differences of how to treat some deferred revenues related to development impact fees, and in the governmental side, and on the other side, we had some adjustments related to the accounting practice or the accounting calculation used to amortize some debt premiums and discounts. Again, that resulted in a positive impact for the city's fund balances and net position for 2023. In turn, we did have some recommendations that are included in the letter related to some cash receipting and deposit processing, but I would, I guess, classify them as things that are not of a significant nature. I think the city has certainly addressed them or is addressing them in 2024 and moving forward, and they're all, I think, pretty straightforward concerns or questions that we raised and that the city is taking care of. So certainly, I think again, city should take great comfort that fiscally the city's in really good hands. The accounting policies and the practices of the city are, the 3 C's: conservative, they're consistent, and they're compliant, and really can't ask for better than that. So I guess if there are no questions, I'd certainly like to express our thanks to Margaret, to Joe, to Mike, Shannon, really the rest of the city for putting up with us during our audit questions and going through the audit process, and really just, I think the positive financial results really reflect the efforts of the city staff to ensure that, the success for the city. So
Right.
thank you very much.
Right. Thank you. While we have Michael front and center, does anybody have any questions for Michael? Okay. I've got two for you, if that's all right.
Sure. Yes, please.
First, a comment, what part of, Joe, what I heard was you have big shoes to fill, but another note. You talked about software, SaaS, basically SaaS agreements being classified now as a long-term liability.
Right.
How is that done? Is that any SaaS agreement that's for more than 1 year terms?
Yeah,
So,
there is like a threshold applied in terms of the discounted value of that, and there is a related asset that is reflected as well, because the intent of the new standard is that if we have agreed to have continued access to an asset such as the software, that we've essentially, for all intents and purposes, purchased it, and we've committed to the string of payments. So there's this, at the initial part of it, we have an equivalent asset and liability that get amortized over the same period of time.
so is that amortized over the term of the SaaS agreement? Okay,
Yes. Yeah.
all right. So, and I don't know what the terms are, but let's say accounting software, it's a 5-year term. It gets amortized over the 5 years. Something like Adobe, which is basically month to month, does not fall into those long-term liabilities.
Right. And we would be looking at, first of all, making sure that they're financially material, as we say, to the financial statement. So we would make sure that these are, fiscally significant in their impact relative to the financial statements of the city. So there's a lot of smaller agreements that would not qualify for that, for reporting under that standard.
Sure. My other question was, I was slightly confused reading through the notes that part of the audit is not necessarily an internal control audit, but yet there were notes, and I may have misread that, but yet I saw there were notes on 2 items as related to, how receipts and some other stuff like that was handled.
Mhm.
So I was a little confused because in one paragraph I say you don't do it, but then I saw notes about some areas for improvement. So how do we as a city really make sure our internal controls are where they should be? And does that fall under your area of responsibility?
So kind of walking through that, our audit is directed at the financial statements. So the objective of the engagement of the auditor is to report on the financial statements and the financial reporting. So that's where that caveat, call it a CYA, comes in at the beginning of that section related to the recommendations, is that our audit is not primarily directed at finding internal control issues if they exist. But in the course of our audit, which is directed at the financial reporting in the financial statements of the city, we do have the opportunity to come across, opportunities to improve internal controls. So it becomes that flow through, because, as I mentioned earlier, we spend a significant amount of time going around to the departments and understanding and documenting how does the information flow from the departments? How does a recreation center pass flow? Somebody paying for that at the desk, how does that flow through to the financial statements as revenue and cash? How does that? And by working through that process, we sometimes come across opportunities, which we've identified a couple there. But again, the reason that we are looking at those areas and coming across those opportunities is in the context of understanding the system so that we can report on the audited financial statements themselves.
Okay, that makes sense.
Sorry.
Thank you. Does anybody else have questions?
Is this something that's done every year? How often is this done? How frequent? Every year?
The audit is done annually, yes, per city charter and per state statute.
All right, I think you're off the hot seat for the moment. So thank you. Margaret, you are up.
Oh, you did steal a lot of my thunder, so.
I'm sorry. You got better,
Reports.
you have nice pictures though, and a much better way of explaining it.
Thank you. It was great to work with them this year, and new auditors are always kind of refreshing because they come in with a fresh set of eyes and find some things that we can improve on, which is really helpful to us. So I find that as a positive, not a negative. And let me see if I can log in so I can read my notes. Happens when you don't work every day now.
I'll rub it in.
Okay, I think, like I said, Mike covered it very well. Just for those that are new to financial statements, just wanted to kind of go over the various components of that huge, 100. It starts off with the auditor's reports and the opinions that Michael presented to you. And then we go into a brief summary of management's discussion and analysis. A lot of times we refer to it as the MD&A, which kind of covers in summary form some of the financial highlights and information. Then we get into the basic financial statements, which are all the numbers and tables full of numbers. And we have the notes to the financial statements, and those notes kind of explain what's behind the numbers. So it's a little bit more of a narrative section about how different numbers come up and get combined in the financial statements and what that $1 million is made up of in more larger items anyway. And then we have required supplementary information, which is essentially budget to actual statements for some of the major funds, Community Center Fund and the General Fund. The supplementary information includes a lot of detail. That's what you see kind of in your budget book. All the 18 funds that we have, budget to actual comparisons for the year end. So that you can kind of see the budget that budget process that you're getting ready to go into 2024. This kind of shows out where it ended up as of 2023. And then in this year, we had a single audit. So then we have the single audit reports and the schedule of financial awards and the auditor's opinion on those. So just basically that's the financial statements and how it's organized and put together. Sometimes I say read from the back page to the first page because all the detail that you're used to seeing is kind of in the back. Then it's all summarized the closer you get to the front. Then also just fund types to review that with the council. We have 3 different fund types that we deal with. One is governmental funds, and those are primarily funded with tax dollars. And let me get it ahead on my notes here. And you can kind of see there, that's where the bulk of our funds in. The general fund is a governmental fund, as well as all the other funds that you see there listed. Proprietary funds, the intent with proprietary funds is to recover your costs through user fees and charges. And those funds are the sewer fund, trash fund, irrigation fund, those things that we operate more like a business. We don't collect tax dollars for those. And then our fiduciary funds are the ones that we act as a trustee essentially on. That's the City of Fruita's retirement plans, as well as the School Land Dedication Fund, where we hold money on behalf of the school district for the school land dedication fees. So all of those 3 separate types of funds are included in the financial statements and are kind of grouped together throughout the statements. And yes, you're doing great, Sierra. Just to start off with an overview, and I think Mike did cover a lot of this really well, but we'll start with the government-wide financial statements. The focus of the government-wide statements is on the long term. So it includes capital assets and long-term debt, whereas your fund statements are focused on the short term. They're focused on what do you have available now. We're not looking at the long-term debt. We're not looking at the capital assets. So the government-wide focuses on those long-term assets and liabilities. And so on our government-wide net position, the net position being the difference between our assets and liabilities. So that's how much greater our assets are than our liabilities is citywide, 115 million, or excuse me, 125 million for 2023. You break that down into the governmental activities, those tax funded activities, and our net position is 88 million, and the business type activities is about 37 million. The net position increased 10 million or 8%, 8.6% from the prior year. Yeah.
Is that a typical growth? Is that?
It's a little bit higher. It's a little bit higher than we've had in the last few years. I think COVID was really kind of, we didn't have a lot of growth in some of the capital assets that we experienced. Before that, I think it's probably fairly close, maybe a little bit higher, just inflation factors and things like that. Then the next slides here. The net position, like I said, is difference between the assets and the liabilities. And then that net position is broken down into different categories. And as Mike said, 70% of that is invested in capital assets. So those are non-spendable fund balance. It's the streets, it's the sewer lines, it's the things that are in that make up the services or the things that we provide to our citizens. Parks, improvements, buildings, all of those are our capital assets. And that's where the bulk of that is, 70%. And it had an increase of 6.8 million. And I'll get into a little bit on that later. The restricted assets make up about 7% of our fund or our net position. And those restricted assets are things that are restrictions that are placed on our funds by outside agencies, laws, or others. And they include, like Mike said, the Tabor Emergency Reserve Fund, development impact fees, special revenue funds are limited in purpose to what they can be spent on. So they're restricted for the purpose, like your lottery funds have to be spent on Parks and Rec. So those are restricted funds on your special revenue funds. And then we have unrestricted assets, which is the amount that's really available for the city's purposes that you can go out and spend. And that makes up about 23% of the fund balance. That's the number most of us focus on because that's what we have to do future good things with. We had an increase of 2.2 million in our unrestricted assets, which is an 8% increase. And the amount that's available there citywide is just about 29.6 million. And next slide. One thing, I'm sorry. One thing I might hit on there on the restricted assets, Mike referred to some prior period adjustments that we did. And in 2020, we adopted a new land use code where the development impact fees were changed and they were no longer refundable to the people who paid those. And so we hadn't changed our accounting practices on that. So now those are recorded as revenue when received, but then they're restricted in this fund balance until they're spent for the purpose of which they were given out or collected for. All right. Once again, we're just kind of repeating some of the same information, but looking at it in different ways. A total increase of 7.5 million in assets government-wide, a decrease of 2.5 million in liabilities. So that's the directions you want to go. You want to increase your assets, you want to decrease your liabilities. In the business type activities, the assets increased 1.7 million. And most of that was attributed to capital assets. And our liabilities decreased 2.4 million. And most of that was due to payment of long-term debt and current debt. At the end of 2022, the previous year, we had quite a bit of accounts payable associated with capital projects at the end of the year, which that was paid off throughout 2023. And that's why the current debt decreased so much. And then in governmental activities, our assets increased 5.8 million with a 1.7 million increase in current assets and 4.1 million in long-term assets. Long-term primarily being capital, infrastructure type things. And then liabilities and deferred inflows of resources were pretty much unchanged from the prior year. Thanks. Let me. So just kind of a summary of the change in net position. It increased 10 million over the prior year. Governmental activities increased by just under 6 million or 7%, and business type activities increased 4.1 million. This shows it yet again another way. This shows kind of the revenues and expenses and how you get to that change in that position. And it shows, the total for the city. We had revenues of 29 million, expenses of 19 million, and the difference between those two being the 10 million, which is what our net position increased by. Next slide, we get to the governmental fund statements. Once again, these are focused on the short term. So you have your capital assets and your long-term debt are removed from these statements. They're more like what you see in your budget book. And they're focused on the short term. And we'll cover just the major funds in these slides. Our major funds being the general fund, community center fund, and the sewer fund. And those are mathematical formulas that determines whether or not it's a major fund or a non-major fund. But essentially, those are the three biggest funds of the city where we have the most money and transactions that take place. So that's So in the general fund, just a quick overview, we had revenues compared to budget and then the difference. So you can see revenues, our final budget was 11.5 million. We brought in 13.3 million with a positive difference of 1.8 million. On expenses, we budgeted 12.2 million. We spent 11.5 million, so a positive variance of about 757,000. And then other financing uses is primarily, not totally, but primarily it's transfers to the capital projects fund. And you can see we budgeted to transfer out 4.5 million from the general fund to the capital projects fund. We only actually transferred 1.2 million. So the positive variance of 3.3 million. And that really has a lot to do with the timing of the capital projects, supply issues, where we're at in design, getting contractors and so forth. So that even though it looks like a savings here, and it was in 2023, those reappropriation budget amendments that you do at the beginning of the year to roll over amounts that were not spent in the prior year is a bulk of this $3 million that you see there. And if you guys have questions, please just ask. Next slide, we kind of just delve down a little bit more into the revenues and where the biggest variances were. With the biggest variance being investment earnings, and that goes from, budgeting conservatively for one, but, we had like a 0.2, 0.3% interest rate in 21, 22, going into 23, we're starting to get 4.5%, 5% on most of our funds, which is, 1,700% increase. So that's why that large variance there. We're looking to see what the Feds do in September, but I'm anticipating you're going to see some rate cuts in the last quarter of this year, and that will affect that interest earning. And also, as you spend money, you have less to earn on. City sales tax, we had a positive variance of 353,000. Intergovernmental revenues, which is shared revenues with the state, like highway users tax, cigarette tax, as well as grant revenues from the state and other agencies. That increase had a positive variance of 291,000. County sales tax, 180,000, and then building inspection fees. That was our first year going into the building inspection program. And so we were kind of rough estimates there, but that brought in $117,000 more than budgeted. On the expense side, this is just kind of a snapshot of all the different departments and where they came in with their variances with budget, with the largest one being non-departmental expenses. That non-departmental expenses includes the contingency funds that you include in the budget every year to accommodate any emergencies or unanticipated things that might happen throughout the year. And we didn't spend a lot of that last year, so that's why you're seeing that $241,000 positive variance. Positive meaning good, even though it shows a negative number, it means it's a good variance to have. And then you can see the different departments there and how they came in compared to budget, with everybody coming in under budget to some extent. The debt service principal and interest, we really didn't have a budget there, and that was for the SPEDAs and the leases that Mike was referring to. the new accounting methods that were implemented in 2023. They were budgeted for in purchase services, which is an operational line item, but through the accounting process and procedures, they get moved to debt service, principal and interest. And then capital outlays, we had a negative, is the only one thing that we had a negative variance. And once again, that was related to the SPEDAs because those are recorded as a capital outlay. They're a capital asset. And once again, those were budgeted in purchase services. So expenses of 11.5 million were under budget in total by 757,000. And then the other category we have, you're so good, Sierra. Other financing sources and uses, these are the transfers in, transfers out, insurance damage awards, the subscription and lease financing, and sale of capital assets, which are not initially budgeted. I mean, you don't anticipate that you're going to get an insurance award or some of these other items. But anyhow, they were budgeted at 4.5 million. We only spent 1.2 million. So that's that positive variance that we talked about, 3.3 million. And that's primarily in the transfers out to the capital projects fund, $2.5 million of that. Fund balance, that's kind of the same thing that we were looking at, net position. It's the assets minus the liabilities, but now you're only looking at current assets. You're not looking at any capital assets, and you're only looking at current liabilities. Sure. You're not looking at any long-term debt. We had a general fund balance of 19.8 million, which is a very strong fund balance. Of that amount, we have 1.3 million that was restricted. A big chunk of that is for our debt service reserve funds of about $750,000 and the Tabor emergency reserve. And there's a typo in here. It's closer to 456,000 instead of 400,000 on the Tabor emergency reserve. And then we also have restricted funds from the county sales tax. That's on public safety, that 0.27%. And so anything that's not spent in the current year, we restrict that for future years and future use. The assigned funds represent amounts that the city council, city manager, or staff have assigned for specific purposes. It can be changed by action of the city council, the city manager, or staff, depending on how it was initially directed. But we have assigned funds of, excuse me, of 10.6 million. That represents 54% of the fund balance and includes amounts. The two largest assignments that we have are for 2024 expenses. We budgeted $8.5 million this year in expenditures from fund balance, savings account, essentially, to spend this year on capital projects. So a big chunk of that 10.6 million that is 8.5 million that's been budgeted for to be spent this year. And then another large chunk is our vehicle and equipment replacement fund. You'll hear us talk about the SURF, which is what that stands for. And that's so that we can mitigate some of the more the costly pieces of replacement of the more costly pieces of equipment that we have. For example, we have a sewer jetter truck that is probably a $600,000, $700,000 piece of equipment. So instead of taking a hit for that all in 1 year and having to reduce operations in a year to pay for it, we put a set amount aside every year and build up a balance so that when that big expenditure comes down, we have these funds to draw from in order to equalize the expenditures throughout the years for the equipment. And then we have unassigned funds, excuse me, of 7.8 million. That represents 39% of the fund balance and includes the operating reserve, which is equal to 2.3 million and represents 25% of our operating expenses in 2023. So that's the amount that the council has said, okay, we want to set aside and make sure we always have that 25% of next year's or this year's expenses that we've kind of set aside for emergencies. If something comes up, we still have 3 months we can operate. If tornado were to hit the town hall, we can still operate on some of those funds. And then the remaining amount is really just a 5.5 million unrestricted and can be used for any purpose of the city that the council deems appropriate. Any questions on the general fund?
Just I would like to ask, just because we're not gonna have you to ask these things, and you can go back over the past 40 years.
No.
I mean, you can though.
Yeah.
What's your opinion right now of where we are as opposed? I mean, we're doing pretty good. We can tell that, but what's your overall opinion as where we are now as where we have been? Where's the highs? Where's the lows in the time that you've been with us? And not to throw you at that, but I do mean it because we're gonna not have you around.
I think you're sitting in very good financial position right now. Keep in mind, though, that some of this financial position has been built up over several years where things have been very slow due to COVID, due to supply chain. So we haven't probably spent as much we would have under previous 5 years, in the last 5 years. So I think some of that is probably artificially inflated just because of the nature of the environment that we're in and the economics that we're in. Once these, I mean, these look like huge numbers, but they can get spent really fast. You can have one capital project that takes them all out. So it's a healthy position that we're in, but you can spend it very quickly. So I guess I would just make sure that what you're spending it on is your priorities and what you want to spend it on, because it's gone when it's gone. I think we've been in a good position for the last several years. I think we're going to start to see a little bit of a slowdown there. You're seeing the inflation slow down, which is a good thing. That helps keep our expenses in check. But on the other side, we still have needs of the community. And I do think that we're starting to see some slowdowns in some of our major revenues, our sales tax revenues, or some of those things are starting to cool off a little bit. They're not in dire straits or anything, but they are starting to cool off a little bit. So I think as you go forward, you might just kind of keep those things in mind. I think hopefully Shannon's learned, if nothing from me, to be conservative when he prepares the budget, and just, expect the unexpected. Does that kind of answer?
No, exactly. Yeah. And I think maybe if I'm comparable to maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. Percentage wise, I guess would probably be the best way to look at it. Cause I know obviously the numbers are going to be different that way, but just the overall.
The one long lasting trend that I see here is in our sales tax dollars, where we used to be bricks and mortar, and that was what we collected our sales tax on. Now we are collecting our sales tax on online sales. And I know you don't get to see the individual details of that, but that's a huge part of where our sales tax increases have come from, is those online sales. And so I think that's different than it was 20 years ago or 10 years ago. I think that adds some stability as you go forward. So you're not so dependent on those bricks and mortar stores. You're depending on just people's purchasing habits. And so inflation will affect that, or drawing back because money's tight and they're getting affected by inflationary factors. That's going to have an impact on it. But I think that's a positive long-term trend that didn't exist, 5 years ago.
Is there anything that you would suggest that we could do to encourage because I'm not even familiar with what we have that's actually creating online sales tax for the town itself.
Okay.
But is there ideas that you have that we can encourage that more? If that's going to be what's going to keep us safe in the future.
I don't know that it needs, I'm not sure that it needs to be encouraged. I think it's people's way of life now. I mean, I think COVID really it kind of made it stand out that online sales were the way to go. So you didn't have to drive to the stores that were closed or, whatever. I think that really brought it out. But I think it's been a sustainable habit that you've seen people have just developed as part of their lifestyles. And I think, if you look at your monthly financial reports, we always kind of put on the bottom there, remote sales. Those are your online sales, and we trend those a little bit differently. If they were starting to go down or something, I would say maybe you need to be concerned, but they continue to increase. So I don't know how you would encourage that unless you want to advertise everybody's.
It's a good line item to keep our eyes on.
Yes.
That's a good indicator.
Yeah, it's a good indicator of what people are doing outside of the brick and mortar stores.
Thank you for everything you've done.
Oh, thank you, James.
All the years.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, moving on to Community Center Fund. Um, This one was really impacted by COVID, and so I've been trying to pay a little bit more special attention to it over the last few years. It was shut down for a number of months, and really kind of suffered revenue wise as a result of that. And I think now we can say it has surpassed pre-COVID numbers. So we're back up on the upswing on it, and it's headed in the right direction. I would just say, long-term, just sticking on James' question there is, you're going to have another community center open, probably in Grand Junction before too long. I'm sure it's going to take some of that business away, but I'm not sure that that's all bad. But you just want to probably watch and continue to monitor that once that center opens up and make sure that it's financially feasible.
Sure.
The other thing going forward with community center, when the bonds are paid off, and I can't remember the years, in 2032,
2039.
2039.
I like the
2032
number
is the
better.
wastewater plant, so. One-
It's still a long ways out there. There's a part of the sales tax that goes away. So right now we have 1 cent of our 3 cent city sales tax that is dedicated to the community center fund. When those bonds are paid off, then
0.4.
6/10.
goes away, and we retain 4/10 for operations. Right now, we're using, the sales tax has surpassed what we are required to pay for our debt service. So we're using it for hopefully capital improvement type projects, one-time projects. You could use some of it for operations, but I would say they would be kind of a very scary proposition to do that, because that money is not going to be there perpetually. It's going to go down unless you go to the voters and
Is there any, I'm sorry, I'm like taking over the conversation, guys, but just as it comes, is there any benefit to us taking those funds and doing a pay down on the balance instead of putting them towards other things?
we refunded those bonds in 2019 and got a fairly good interest rate on it. And there is actually a disadvantage to paying those off early,
That's what I wanted.
because once those bonds are paid off, then that percentage of the sales tax goes away.
Okay.
So revenues, we had a positive variance of about $250,000 in the community center fund. Expenses were under budget by about 1.1 million. That huge number is primarily driven by the water slide, which was initially in last year's budget and got postponed to this year's budget. So you're seeing that expense occur this year instead of last year. But overall, a positive variance to budget of 1.4 million, and revenues exceeded expenses and other financing uses by 626,000. Just to kind of look at that, the two main sources of revenue in the community center fund are the sales and use taxes, which is that 1% that's dedicated for them. And then the charges for services, which are the pass fees and the different memberships that they collect there. And you can see the sales and use taxes, we had a positive variance there of about 174,000, and the charges for services about 8,000, and rents about 8,000, and then other revenues of 62,000. So that leaves you to your $250,000 variance with budget, with your revenues at 3.7 million.
Can you tell me what one of the other things might have been?
I was hoping nobody would ask me that. Let me just take a quick look at the page and see if it tells me anything.
I'm just curious, like.
Yeah.
Are they
Interest,
interest? Okay, all right, good.
investment income.
All right, awesome.
Next one, Sierra, let's see, we have the community center expenses. So you can see here, we've kind of got it broken down by a little bit greater category or detail than we have looked at the other ones, but personnel services, we had spent $200,000 less than budgeted. Purchase services, 38,000 less. Supplies, you can kind of read down there. And then the capital expenses is where the biggest variance was, with 900,000 that was budgeted for the water slide that didn't get spent last year. We get to other financing sources and uses. We had the gym floor flooding last year, if you recall. So we had a fairly large insurance award that of 129,000, but a difference in budget of about $5,000, $6,000. Some minor property sales, equipment sales, I should say. Some subscription finance, and then transfers in and out, some minor variances there. So a total difference in the financing, other financing sources and uses of $50,000. And then we get to the fund balance, the savings account. In the community center fund, we have restricted funds of 1.8 million. It represents 38% of the fund balance. And the only reason those are restricted is that they're restricted and they have to be used on the community center fund. You can't go spend them on the sewer fund or other funds. We have assigned funds of 1.3 million, and that includes amounts assigned for 2024 expenses. So we budgeted to use fund balance of 1.3 million in 2024, and that's what that represents. And then we have committed funds of 1.5 million. It represents 33% of the fund balance. That includes $1 million that's set aside for facility improvements, and the operating reserve, which represents 25% of the 2023 operating expenses of about $500,000. The last one that we'll cover real quick is the sewer fund. Once again, it's a major fund. And expenses were budgeted to exceed revenues by $103,000. Actually, revenues exceeded expenses by $1.2 million, resulted in a positive variance of 1.3 million. We'll kind of get into the details here on the next slide. On the revenue side, you can see we had actually a negative variance in intergovernmental revenues, but that's primarily due to timing of the completion of the H2S project. Those revenues were probably carried over to 2024, and as well as some project savings on that project. We saved quite a bit of money there. Charges for services, we had a positive variance of about 110,000. This is the revenue that we received from the monthly charges as well. And then on the next line, you can see we were under on the tap fees that we collect for sewer. And then investment income, once again, was a positive variance of 158,000. So revenues were very close to actually what was budgeted, just a 0% increase, $33,000. Doesn't kind of register on the percentages. On the expense side of things, we had a positive variance of $1.3 million. The expenses of $6.2 million were under budget by 1.3 million. You can see, and it's broken down between operations, debt service, and capital. The biggest variance there is the capital expenses. And once again, that's expenses that we had saved some funds on, as well as projects that were postponed until 2024. That one's just kind of, I'm not. Then we have the net position, or excuse me, yes, net position in the sewer fund of 35.5 million. Proprietary funds are budgeted through the full accrual basis. And so they don't have fund balance like the governmental funds do. So you're looking here at the same thing that you were looking at in the first slides that we looked at. So you're looking at long-term debt, long-term assets, capital assets. So you see that investment in fixed assets in the sewer fund of $27 million. That's the wastewater treatment plant, sewer lines. And then you have amounts that are restricted. You have some that are restricted for the loan that we have, kind of as a reserve fund and an operating reserve. We have 1.3 million designated for equipment replacement. We have 1.1 million designated for capacity improvements. That 1.1 million represents planned investment fees that you budget for, or that we receive in a year. And we try and put that for capacity improvements, not just necessarily repair and maintenance of the existing system, but improvements to create more capacity or respond to more capacity needs of the wastewater treatment plant or the collection system. And then unrestricted assets, we have 4.7 million at the end of the year. Net position, this just kind of breaks it down a little bit different. It shows the variances between 2023 and 2022. It increased, the net position increased by 4.1 million. The investment in capital assets increased by 2.6. That was the aeration system and the H2S. Amounts designated for mobile equipment increased by 59,000, which was our annual addition to the SURF fund. The $455,000 increase for capacity improvements is the amount of the sewer plant investment fees that we received in 2023. And then the amounts restricted for loan covenants varies based on our operating expenses. It's 25% of operating expenses. So that increased 57,000 in 2023. And in total, the unrestricted net position increased 877,000. So sewer fund is one we worry a little bit about because anything goes wrong there is high dollar. I mean, you don't fix anything for $1,000. It's $1 million. So it's just important, I think, in that sewer fund to make sure that we have an operating reserve and a fairly healthy operating reserve to respond to those needs. You have some contingency funds because nobody can foresee when something might go down.
There's so many puns to what you're saying.
Thanks, James.
Oh, and then the last slide on this is just a listing of the capital asset additions that occurred throughout 2023. Within the governmental funds, we had the Pine Street Bridge, which was our big project of 1.1 million. And then you can kind of see on the list all the other items that were added. But governmental funds, we had about 6.7 million. We keep talking about those capital asset additions, and this is what those additions were. Proprietary funds, we had 3.2 million in asset additions, and this is what we accomplished through that expenditure of funds. Okay, I think the next slides I'm going to go on to are the fiscal health analysis. So I stop there and see if there's any.
A James type question.
Uh-huh.
Um,
That could go all, that could.
Yeah, that's pretty broad.
So coming out of COVID 2022, there was massive supply chain issues. I know, like, trying to buy a police cruiser, which normally take 3 months, now takes 3 years.
Right.
So looking at this last year, 2023, there's a lot of carryover into 2024. Moving into 2024 and 2025, do you see those percentage of capital funds being carried over significantly decreasing?
No. I am not as up to date. I've been out of the loop for a few months.
Yeah, I could answer that, Mayor. Mike Bennett, City Manager. I think we're going to continue to see it going into next year because we have projects like 19 Road that will start construction in November, but you're going to see a bulk of that construction in the new year because it won't finish in December. And we also have the South Mesa street project that will be a 2025 project, but it's been a carryover because of the CDOT grant and kind of the review process. So I don't see it as becoming a consistent trend year over year, but I do see a few of our larger projects that are still going to be, they won't finish this year and go into next year as planned currently.
Probably see, let's say, stuff decrease.
Yes,
Those projects are finally getting caught up.
correct.
COVID.
So
It increased because of other significant capital projects.
right. So looking out further than 2020, this year and next year, I do see that changing a bit. But there's always going to be projects that don't fit a normal calendar year. But we did have more buildup of carryover than I've seen since I've been here, and maybe similar with Margaret because of some of those factors that came up. Some of are grant related as well, and then some have been supply chain. Some have been availability of contractors. So there's been numerous reasons, but it really did start backing up a bit right after the pandemic.
That was my James question. Anybody else have any questions before we start looking at ratios? This is the exciting part, sorry. Some of us is exciting. I know, of all meetings to miss.
Favorite meeting ever.
Well, nobody
Usually
has
has to-
started snoring yet, so I guess we could. So the fiscal health analysis, you kind of, and that's not in this thing here. So I'm going to read a little bit from here, but it's something that the state auditor office of the state auditor for Colorado has put together as a set of ratios, 7 ratios, that provide financial indicators to governmental agencies. Take some of the numbers from the financial statements, puts them together and just says, okay, here's some trends that you should be looking for. Here's, if the trend's going this way, you might be concerned. Here's what we want to see. And kind of take those forward and just kind of give you a layperson's view of where we sit financially. And, if there's areas of concern that you need to take action on or pay closer attention to for several years. It looks typically at a 3-year. I have included a 5-year look back just because COVID just introduced so many abnormalities to financial situations that I think at this point, like the 5 years is probably a better gauge. Then you at least get to compare pre-COVID to where we are today and not look at comparing it to COVID. It's just a tool to analyze our fiscal health analysis. And then the management discussion analysis is in the financial statements can kind of provide some additional information as well as the financial statements themselves. And then there's, factors that are outside of our control that can impact these financial analysis, the inflation that we've seen, COVID, some of those things can have an impact, which is not really anything that you can control. Yes. And it indicate, it's okay to be up and down 1 year or 2 years. When it starts to get to be 3 years, you're looking at more of a trend. But once again, I think it's probably with COVID, a 5-year trend is a little bit better as a look back right now. You get some more normalcy going. There's no consideration in these ratios about actions that have been taken or any budget things that you've taken to affect these trends. And it only looks at historical data. It doesn't look as you go forward. So the first ratio that we're going to look at is our cash to liabilities ratio. And this essentially is there enough cash to pay current liabilities. It shows how much a downward trend could indicate that we have decreasing cash, increasing liabilities, timing issues of cash flow and payments at the period end may have an adverse impact. I don't know if I need to read all those. So if we want to go on to the next slides here, you can see that we are trending in the right direction. As you look at these, the benchmark is where they say, you want to at least be here. This is the benchmark. So benchmark on this ratio is 1. That means you have enough cash to pay your liability. So you have $100 in cash and you have a $100 bill that's due. That's what 1 means. You have enough cash to pay your liabilities. Once you start getting up, that means we're at 5.73. We have 573% more cash than we need to pay our current liabilities.
Who determines, just the 1-to-1 ratio seems like a really low benchmark.
It does. It does.
That's the worst benchmark ever. Yeah, it's just,
I would have to say that's you're living from paycheck to paycheck.
Mr. Mayor, I would add to the state auditor's office developed these ratios and criteria, but it also did involve feedback from the Government Finance Officers Association, just something that Margaret's a part of, Joe's a part of, and I'm a part of as well. That sets the criteria. And then it also involved ICMA as well, the International City County Managers Association. So they were developed by multiple organizations, but the ratios we use are all provided by the auditor's office. No.
Sorry.
I think what you're looking for here though is, we're at that 400 to 500% range. If you start to see that declining for 3 years, what's going on? We're getting less cash, and it could be very good reasons. You're spending $10 million on a capital project, and your cash is going to go down. But just kind of watching at it for the trends and from your educated positions of what is going on in the city and what is happening, and that it's not a financial concern. It's you're getting something accomplished type concern. The next slide. We talk about the unrestricted fund balance ratio. And this really addresses how long will your reserves last to pay future expenses. And as you recall, Michael Jenkins was talking about, we had 137% of a year's expenses of cash on hand, or unrestricted fund balance on hand to pay expenses if something were to go south. If you were not to collect any revenues or anything, you have those funds that you could pay future expenses for and still continue to operate fairly normally. So the benchmark on this one is 25%, that 3 months of operating expenses. And you can see we're well above that. The next ratio. Oh, sorry, did I not? Yeah, you're good.
You got
You're
it.
good. Is the debt burden ratio. And this essentially it says, do the annual revenues cover the debt service payments? So we have some long-term debt where we're obligated to make payments, primarily the loan that we have on the wastewater treatment plant and then the bonds that we have on the Fruita Community Center. And one represents in here that the revenue that's required to have to cover your debt service. And you can see, once again, we are in a strong position there. We have more than enough revenue to pay our obligations, to various bondholders and loan issuers. And that was the community center. Next one is the sewer fund. Once again, it's the same set of benchmarks, and it shows that in the sewer fund, we have 3.1 coverage on our annual debt service requirements. And it's a little tougher in the covering that debt service. We do have escalating bond payments. We did have the Colorado Water Power Development Authority refunded those bonds several years back and saved us a substantial amount of money and interest and stuff. But a lot of that's realized over the term of the bond payments and will be realized as we get towards the end of those loan payments. The next ratio just shows you our tax revenue per capita. And it's like, what is the relationship between population growth and tax revenues? So you can see that we, since 2019, pre-COVID, we've increased about 33% in tax revenue per capita. That's a sign of not necessarily we're richer, it's the inflation, it's the slowdown during COVID era. And you can see that this last year, it decreased just slightly on the tax revenue per capita from what it was the prior year. The thing that you're looking at here is you wanting to see a steady or an increasing number. If it declines, I mean, I'm not sure that a 7-point decline is much to worry about there, but if it continues to decline for several years, you need to probably take a look, and that's a concern as you go forward.
And this doesn't take into the equalization of inflation. So when we,
No.
so from like 2022 to 2023, where there's a 20.3% increase.
Yeah, you got to take into account, you got an 8% or 10% inflation that year. And it also, I think, goes back to some of that tax revenue with the online sales. This is another way to monitor that, James. The next slide is the same kind of thing. Now I just want to stress, these are not direct correlations, even though I'm going to show a slide that looks like maybe they are. One is tax revenues. That includes all tax revenues, lodging tax, sales tax, property tax, highway tax. It includes all tax revenues. Right now, we're looking at general fund expenditures, just general fund expenditures, net of capital expenses, and I apologize for the time. What you're looking at here, you're wanting to see like a steady or declining number. A financial indicator is a continuous increase from year 1 to year 3. And you can see we have a continuous increase from year 1 to year 3. And then this is where you kind of need to use your history of what's going on in the community, the inflation rates, the supply and demand issues, and that's accounting for some of this increase. Also, your just your general fund, some additional services that you've added and things like that will also impact this number. What I've tried to show on the next slide is just kind of, it's more trending. It's comparing those tax revenues for all funds versus the general fund expenses per capita without capital expenses. And I'm looking at that blue And you can see in the years 2020, 21, and 22, there's a pretty wide gap there. But now we're back to that gap is really more similar to what we were seeing in 2019, the variance between the tax revenues and the general fund expenses. And so I think we had a fairly abnormal couple of years, but that trend that you're looking for is more equal to what you see in the 2019. It's kind of where we're at now. So I think we've kind of come full circle or straight forward a few years. And we're kind of seeing pre-existing COVID conditions. The next one we have is our operating margin ratio. What this tells you is how many dollars do we add to reserves for every dollar that's generated in revenues? So how much do we sock away in our savings account? And you can see here, we did pretty good during COVID. Everything shut down. We're not spending as much money. If you could spend it, you couldn't get it. So you have some pretty good operating margin ratios there. Obviously, they're showing 0 as a benchmark. That, at least you're not adding anything to your reserves, but you're spending every dollar, you're living paycheck to paycheck at 0, essentially. So this is showing that for the last several years, we've been adding, 19 cents, 25 cents to every dollar we take in reserves. And last year in 2023, we added 4 cents. It's not the goal of government to build a savings account. It's the goal of the government is to take care of our citizens. And so I don't see anything wrong with that, but if there's a trend and it's decreasing continuously over several years, that might be an area of concern to look at. But as we talked about to start with, 1 year, we're looking at trends. We're not looking at a 1 year blip up and down. So last year excuse me?
Is there any preliminary data for 2024?
On the operating margin, we can probably generate something for the first 6 months, first 9 months of the year, or something like that. That would be helpful.
But Margaret, these are decided trends, right? Because we're spending fund balance deliberately on large capital projects. Right.
Correct. But this is operating margin.
Okay.
And I would have to go back and look and see what's calculated in there. Some of these operating margin, I think, takes out capital expenses.
Okay.
But I'll make sure of that.
Thank you.
So it takes out the capital expenses, so that drop is without the money.
I think capital's still in there, actually.
Let me look.
Oh, okay. Oh, I kind of hope.
Yeah. In the prior slide, it says the ratio can be negative if you do have those one-time capital
Is it?
expenses. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
And that would make sense.
So I was getting scary for a second. I was like, wait, where's it all going?
Yeah, exactly.
Hold up, just-
Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's okay.
Your last time at the,
Right. Okay, so it's the general fund total revenue and less the general fund full expenditures net of transfers. So it excludes the transfers.
But it doesn't include capital.
It includes,
net up.
it excludes transfers. So it could include general fund capital equipment,
Gotcha.
but not capital projects.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay.
It's not-
Oh, the last one then is, I think it's the last one. Enterprise net position, and we've kind of talked about this in various slides. But your benchmark is a steady or constant number. And we have a pretty steady or constant number going from 1,030 to 1,130. This just lets you know whether or not your enterprise funds are operating as they should. Remember, these are operated like a business. You're trying to collect enough revenue to pay for the expenses, tax revenue is in there. And so a steady number just indicates you're keeping up with expenses and your revenues are keeping up with your expenses. Okay.
And the final question slide.
Always.
Questions?
Go ahead. I do have one question, way back to the recommendations
Yeah.
from the auditor. Can somebody speak to me about what the sole source vendors, like what is included in that?
So in our purchasing policies, we have identified this procurement phase over a certain dollar purchase. There's some exceptions to that, and that's a sole source vendor. So a lot of it occurs at the wastewater treatment plant. You have manufactured equipment that's manufactured by ABC company, and you have to replace a part on it. You can't just get that from Jane Doe down the street. You have to go to ABC company and get that part. So it's a sole source vendor. Doesn't go out to bid because you can only get it from one place.
Okay.
You know, some really easy examples of that would be like Excel Energy. You get your power from, I mean, I guess you could go get solar or U Water. Those are
Right,
sole
yeah.
source vendors, but there are other places in operations where those sole source vendors come in. And so that is an exception to some of the purchasing policy requirements. And we had some of those forms that are completed that were supposed to be updated every 4 or 5 years, and they came across one that was fairly old, I think.
Great. I was just curious what was included in that. Thank you.
I have a question, just a broad overview, as this is my first experience with the audit, that it's best understood as a review of the systems and processes of reporting.
Uh-huh.
That what he's looking at is auditing, reviewing how you're reporting.
Yeah, so what he's really, what the auditors are auditing is the actual numbers in here. How did I come up with the numbers that I put in this? So in order to do that, I mean, they're auditing to make sure they're correct. They have to follow our processes through. So they take a cash receipt that, you know, somebody comes in and pays a bill and they walk it through the process. And during that process, they can say, you know, why do you do it this way? And they'll say, or why don't you do it this way? Or with accounts payable, which is where their major focus is, you know, they'll take a sampling of, you know, 20 accounts payable items throughout the year, and they'll look at them and in detail and say, okay, was this transaction, did you have the proper procurement processes, the sole source vendor list, the right account numbers? Did you inadvertently pay sales tax on it? And they'll look at that in depth. And so when they were doing that, they find things that come up because we all make mistakes. And then that's kind of what they're trying to address there. You know, if you have internal controls in place that can address so that these mistakes aren't made. And I think it's a helpful thing.
Yes.
This is,
The past having some recommendations. And I
yeah.
think
We haven't had any
This is really
recommendations for
great. Yeah.
years, so, so it's good to have that fresh set of eyes looking at it, because you get used to doing things a certain way, and it's like, oh, yeah, you know, things have changed in the world today, and we need to update that process.
So, and when does this start? When does this process begin again? Like, how many months does it take?
They will probably, you know, I'm leaving that up to Joe to schedule, but I'm guessing they are new auditors this year, so we have to change auditors by charter every 8 years. You can change quicker than that, but at least every 8 years, and that's to focus on getting that new set of eyes to look at stuff. But they will probably do some field work January-ish, and then some more field work maybe again in April, May. And then hopefully next year we will have a more timely audit. We did have to request an extension this year with the state auditor's office to extend it past the August 30th deadline, or excuse me, the July 30th deadline. But hopefully it will be a little bit more timely. But this is also a good intro into your budget as you go into your budget
it is.
process and your strategic planning, I think, to have that fresh where you've been as to where you're going.
And thank you, because this is like the big kid version of show your work. Like, this is crazy. This is amazing. And it's also a little impressed. Yeah.
Anybody else? I want to jump on the recommendation page. I love that as well. I know you guys have only had it looks like about for 4 days. Obviously we're going to want to address those things.
Also,
Anybody?
We already
That's
have.
what I was wondering.
We've had it longer because we've had drafts.
Okay.
they came in when they did their field work,
All
and they
right.
said that these are going to be the things that we're going to recommend. I have had several months of notice on those.
That's what I figured, but I wanted to ask, like, it seems to me like, isn't the police department using manual receipt, isn't that kind of antiquated? Are we looking at upgrading their systems, or what are we looking at it kind of hitting some of these recommendations?
The police department takes in very little cash,
Sure.
and so they enter it into Springbrook, but I think when their process has been when somebody comes up to the counter, they don't always have that Springbrook open because
Yeah.
they're working on other stuff and they'll just write it on hand receipt. So, yeah, need to work.
So at this point, we don't think it's a big enough problem to,
I think I think it's a good recommendation because it's come up too in the past where I've audited them and it's like, there's some missing receipt numbers and ask questions about it. And it's like, oh, I just got voided and thrown in the trash. It's like, no, you need to keep that. So it's just, they're not financial people. They're people and just training on that and giving them some proper training.
but I again, I want to commend them for that because that's phenomenal. And what I gather from that is that really shows me
A deep.
how deep that they're diving, and that it really is reassuring to know that they're
It's also
finding stuff that little.
but I love that that's like that
That's
that's it. Like
They're non-material.
yeah, it's
That's great.
pretty darn cool
Yeah,
that that's
Phenomenal.
yeah.
Hey,
If I could jump in, I think you're looking at it exactly right. That, take comfort that the things that we quote unquote found or we came across in our, walkthroughs, in our understanding of the system were pretty, pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. And I think just reinforces that, you got good people at the helm there and looking in the departments, working through this stuff. And I think that's should be comforting.
I bet it'd be fun to take him out to coffee and ask him some of the crazy things he's ran. Thank you, though. You guys did a great job.
Yeah, thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And really, Margaret, and phenomenal job. Council, I think you guys really need to know how spoiled you are in having
Oh, we know.
a finance department that provides you that level of detail and that level of analysis of your financial affairs. So I think, you're in great hands. You have been in great hands. I think going forward, Joe will keep you in, steady hand on the helm there going forward. So, so there you go.
Michael.
Thank you,
Thank you
Michael.
so much, Michael. Thank you.
And Margaret, once again, thank you so much for, this doesn't happen by accident. This has been, years in the making, kind of building up to these processes and this reporting. I know every year things get tweaked a little bit. And this, once again, you've played such a major hand in this. You're going to be missed. As James alluded, we are going to miss some of that institutional knowledge where, hey, 15 years ago, why did we do this? But truly, just a heartfelt, great gratitude from all of us.
Thank you all.
Now run.
I'm not going to stick around for the rest of your meeting.
And
All
you're
right.
off the hook.
Let you clear your stuff out.
All right.
Need to approve the
Thanks, Margaret.
Right.
report, the statements, and accept the auditor's report.
That is a very good question. It's a
There.
It is a
but
record.
it's a presentation. Michael,
Yeah, do we need
do we need to
Yeah.
approve this, or since it was a presentation?
We have
In the
a
minutes,
motion
the
in.
way it says it, yeah.
Okay,
So I move to approve the City of Fruita 2023 financial statements and accept the auditor's report.
thank
Second.
you. We have a first and a second. Any other questions or comments before we poll? Deb, would you kindly poll council?
Counselor Purser,
Yes.
Counselor Parrish,
Yes.
Counselor Stolarczyk,
Yes.
Counselor Miller,
Yes.
and Counselor Williams.
Before I answer, if we said no, then Margaret would have to stick around. and-
He's already
No.
gone.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. All
I
right.
appreciate that effort, though.
We're done with proclamations and presentations, so now we're moving into public participation. This section is set aside for the city council to listen to comments by the public regarding items that do not otherwise appear on this agenda. Generally, the city council will not discuss the issues and will not take any official action under this section of the agenda. We ask that you please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And we also ask that you state your full name and address if you come up to speak. So with that, is there anybody that would like to come up and speak? Please come on up. And we're excited to have you here.
Hi, my name's Layla. I live on North Cedar Street 169. Why I'm here today is to talk to you about the middle school. I don't want you guys to do anything with it because there's a bunch of cheerleaders and little kids football, and they like to play, and soccer does. And I love to walk my neighbor's dog, Vera. And people walk their dogs there, they play there, all that stuff. And you could turn the gym into a place for kids to play basketball and for such as big meetings to meet. And the art room could be used for the art groups and groups for workshops. The shop glass room could be used for teach people how to repair lawnmowers and even little small things to fix. And there could also be music groups could record their music in the music room, and groups could use classrooms as like meeting rooms. And then you could discuss or teach businesses in other classrooms to make or sell things, or have the offices there. The second floor can be apartments for people who need homes for their safety and so they can have somewhere nice to stay. And I'm just gonna ask you one more time, please leave the middle school alone.
Thank you, Layla.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great.
Anybody is going to follow that? I wish you the best of luck.
Hey, will you check back with us and make sure that everything's going good from time to time? Thank you.
Yes. We appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would anybody else? Thank you.
A really tough act to follow. I'm Tessa Bynum. I live at 255 North Ash Street. So I'm back again to ask if you guys have reviewed the traffic study that was done on my street at the end of June. The study was completed. I have reviewed it, so that means that you guys have been able to review it or should have been able to review it. So on July 30th, there was a street closure somewhere in Fruita. I don't know where. I really don't care where. I just care that the street closure resulted in dump trucks speeding up and down my street and almost wiping out a FedEx truck right in front of my house. Most terrifying thing in the entire world. There was also a closure on East Paber from August 7th to the 9th. That resulted in a lot of people driving up and down my street and speeding up and down my street. My kids started riding their bikes to school. So that means to and from school, they ride their bikes. I'm there, of course, but like there are people speeding up and down my street all the time. So I want something done. So I've done my part. I'm here to remind you that you guys are supposed to be doing your part. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Right. Thank you very much. All right. Is there anybody else that would like to come up and speak? All right. Hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and close public participation. and we are going to move into the consent agenda. These are items where all conditions or requirements have been agreed to or met prior to the time they come before council for final action. These items will be approved by a single motion of the council. Members of the council may ask that an item be removed from the consent agenda and fully discussed. All items not removed from the consent section will then be approved. A member of the council may vote no on a specific item without asking that they be removed from the consent section for full discussion. Any item that is removed from the consent agenda will be placed at the end of the consent agenda. So I want to open this up, the consent agenda open. Try this again. I'd like to open up the consent agenda for public participation. Is there anybody that would like to speak on anything that's part of the consent agenda?
I'm back. I'm Tessa Bynum, over at 255 North Ash Street. So the one that I would like to address is boards and commissions. So I want to draw attention to the boards and commissions policy, page 4, section F, number 3, which states that vacancies will be advertised for a minimum of 30 days in 5 publications and through word of mouth. So I have printouts right here of 2 of the publications that are the city page and the boards and commission page. And neither one of the vacancies that are available have been posted for the last 30 days or since June. And so while I know Mel and he's lived here a lot longer than I am because he's older than I am, no offense, but and I know that he's done a lot of great things for the city, so it has nothing to do with him. But I don't really think that it's fair that like he gets reappointed to a board that wasn't advertised because nobody else had an opportunity to apply. Even though it says in the thing that the mayor has to sign that says that no other applications were received. Well, maybe there were no other applications received because nobody knew that there was a vacancy. I also believe that there is a police commission vacancy available that is also not on the website. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Well, I would say that if you just recently looked, they're not going to appear there. The vacancies were advertised, but once the mayor has determined that an appointment will be made, those appointments are taken down. So they have been published for 30 days. I don't know I know on the website they were. So I guess I would ask
I've been filling out an application for a board and commission. So I've been looking at a commission since the middle of July, and there have been no changes to the boards and commissions. It's also not on the Facebook page, which it's supposed to be per the policy. And I searched the Facebook page before I came here tonight and just searched like boards and commissions, and it is not on the Facebook page. It's not anywhere on the vacancies.
on fruita.org.
Yes.
This is first of all, thank you for your comment and thank you for your research on this. This is not intended to be a dialogue session on that, but I want to first start by saying thank you once again for coming up. And this is something that we will go back and confirm that this has been done. And if for some reason we are not doing it the way that it should be, we will certainly look at making those adjustments.
Yes, it is in our boards and commissions policy that we do advertise it for 30 days minimum. So
in the interest of, well, we should
Thank you.
probably pull that off. I would move that we pull off C.
Okay. All right, so let's move item C off the agenda and we'll discuss it after the approval of the consent agenda. Okay. Are there any other comments, public comments on the consent agenda? All right, hearing none, I'm going to close public participation and bring it back to council. So now, James.
Yeah, I would say I'd move that we pull C off. And for me too, I was already wanting to ask about the B, Didn't that fall under the purview of what we had just?
This is
Um,
why it's on the consent agenda.
Yeah.
It's,
oh, that's why. Okay. So this is where it's supposed to be now. Okay, good.
okay.
All right. Yeah, because we don't have to go through it. All right. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you for the clarity.
Any other comments? All right, so we'll need a motion to approve sections A and B on the consent.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve items A and B on the consent agenda.
Second.
Any additional questions or comments? All right, Deb, would you kindly poll council?
Counselor Parrish,
Yes.
Counselor Stolarczyk,
Yes.
Counselor Miller,
Yes.
Counselor Williams,
Yes.
Counselor Purser.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. And then, so we're now placing item C at the end of this section, and now it's open for our internal discussion. So I think this issue has been brought to our attention. I would like to, personally, I don't have firsthand knowledge. We have to rely on staff just to confirm that the proper processes have been taken place.
Can we postpone that appointment?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what
think
I
we
would
need to
suggest.
postpone
Yeah,
until we can confirm that.
that's a good idea.
Yeah, I will do a review and get back to council.
We
Right.
need a motion for that to move.
I don't believe we need a motion because it's
Already been
not on there,
removed.
so it doesn't get approved.
And then would we just place it back after for next?
At the next, well, yeah, we'll
Next step,
Confident.
Pending
I would
on
like to
how-
next steps be
see what
hear back
happened
from
and
staff
go from there.
in terms of the overview and the process to see if it's being, assuming, if it's being followed, if it's not being followed, and if there needs to be any sort of adjustments being made in terms of how we do things.
Maybe make this like a really short point in the workshop that's coming up. Where they can address it just a few minutes and kind of show us what that looks like and where we did address, where it was or where it wasn't.
We can do that.
That's
That'd be great. Great idea.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Thank you. All right.
Mayor, members of council, just to note, item B in the consent agenda was on the consent because the ordinance hasn't taken effect yet. It takes 30
Okay.
days to take effect, but
Gotcha. Okay.
Because it wouldn't even have come across our desk. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and it won't in the future, but it won't go into effect until September 6th.
Okay, thank you.
You were correct. It is, I'm trying to be mindful of time. It is 8:42. We have no public, we need to skip section 7 because of we're not appointing with that board. We have no public hearings. And so next on the agenda would be the administrative agenda, which we're going to hear from Headwater Housing Partners. I believe that's going to be a little bit longer of a discussion. So I would, let's take a 5-minute recess. The time is 8:42 and we should be back at 8:47. Thank you.
You guys should have saw Andrea in her little beret this weekend.
I saw, oh, yes, I did see pictures. I was
I love the video, by the way. It was great. Yep.
That's so good.
Yeah, that was
Best
really
part was at
fun.
the end.
I showed up because I thought I was gonna be filming it, and when Ammon showed up, I'm like, "Are you the artist?" He's like, "No, I'm Ammon."
It was beautiful.
No, they did a fantastic.
You guys ready? Yep. All right, good job, guys, that we kept that to 5 minutes. The time is 8:47. Let me make sure I get that right tonight. Calling the meeting back to order. So next we have in the administrative agenda, the Headwater Housing Partners presentation, and this will be presented by our city manager, Mike Bennett, our planning and development director, Dan Karras, and representatives from the Headwaters Housing Partners. So I believe, Mike, you're kicking this off.
I am. Thank you, Mayor, members of council. So tonight we this presentation is twofold. We wanted to do, after the mayor and I had talked about doing a little bit of review on actual concrete plans that we have related to housing. Many of you were not on the council when we conducted these studies or when we adopted these plans. So we wanted to do a quick review. I'll try and make that a little bit quicker since it was in the packet for all to read. And then we do have a presentation by Headwaters Housing Partners, and this was at the request of council to have them come and present their idea. I do want to note that this is not for an approval of a project tonight. This is them pitching their idea to the city council. We do, as staff, have a recommendation because after a pitch, we don't want it just hanging out there. We do feel like this has merit to continue to look into. So we can come back to this and answer questions, but we do have a recommendation that was in the packet that council direct us to continue to get more information enough to be able to make a future decision related to this. But again, it's not to approve or disapprove the project as a whole, but to get that overview from Headwaters. Before we turn the time over to Headwaters, I just wanted to give a quick review. Dan and I talked. I'm just going to do that, and Dan Karras, our planning and development director, is here to answer any questions throughout this presentation tonight at any point in time. But I wanted to do a quick review of our ultimate guide, which is Fruita in Motion, which is our comprehensive plan, which was updated in 2020. We've talked about it in many, many meetings, and we had tremendous engagement with the community, over 4,000 people that engaged in a year-long period where it talks about how we grow, where we grow, what community values are, and then very specific strategic action areas. And one of those is efficient development, where the plan stresses infill development over sprawl and strategies to address housing affordability. So that was one of the major themes in the plan. And of course, it can get deeper than that. That led to us updating essentially the law or policy related to growth and development, which is the land use code, and that was adopted in 2021. And that land use code was built around achieving this theme, as well as many other strategies within the comprehensive plan, and maintaining with the values in the forefront, and written in a way that it's a policy written away for achieving what the community is seeking to have, not written in a way to exclude certain things, but written in a way to actually achieve the goals that the community is looking for. After that, there was the Grand Valley Housing Needs Assessment, which was done in 2021 as well, and that was paid for the majority by the city of Grand Junction, but it was for a housing study, not only for the city, but for the whole valley. And so it was expanded into the valley. And that talked about what's in the cover sheet here about rising rents and rising home prices both create barriers to ownership as current renters have a harder time. And again, this is 2021. have a harder time saving for a down payment while the liquid capital required for a down payment rises with escalating home prices. And in addition, priced affordability for low-income residents are increasingly being cash financed, leaving low-income buyers unable to enter the market. So that was a big part of that. And then it got a lot deeper with the data as well. And then in 2022, the city paid for a deeper dive of a housing study within the city of Fruita. So we contracted with Economic Planning Solutions to do a housing study for us, and that got deeper than the Grand Valley needs assessment. This is where some of you may remember during past presentations where you see the gap between the average pay of all the various sectors of workforce in the city of Fruita, what that average pay is, and then this gap between what the average house price was. And this was with data that was coming years prior. This was a study in 2022, so they were using sometimes 18 and 19, sometimes a little bit of 20, but mainly those years for the data points, which we know is only escalated with inflation and other factors related to the price of homes, and that gap has not just been met in between, and it's the largest gap this community had ever seen compared to decades prior. So there were a little bit of that notion in some of those years of I just pulled my bootstraps up and made it work back in 30, 40 years ago, and there wasn't that level of gap between an average price of a home and the average pay, to where you would be required at average pay to purchase an average home to spend more than 30%, far more than 30% of your income. So that was a new challenge that we, and not just Fruita, this was a challenge being faced, not only throughout the Grand Valley, but throughout many of the states in the country. So this was a kind of a new thing that we started seeing. In that study, there was a policy goal for the city's housing program to reduce the share of in-commuters from 68%, and this is those working and in commuting, from 68% of the Fruita workforce to 50%. So basically what the goals are is that how do we as a city partner and work on things so that we can work with others so that we can create less people or more people that can live in Fruita and work in Fruita. And that also led to the creation of a housing authority. And that was another tool that was set up. And just to remind you, the purpose of that was narrowed down to one, a very specific bullet. And that's to the purpose is the authority is established to assist the city of Fruita in meeting its goals of housing for all those who want to live in Fruita and to maintain various types of housing within the city in the following ways. And then here is the way, right? By fostering and coordinating cooperation with partners within and outside of the city of Fruita to create affordable housing through tax abatement programming. And then in parentheses, we added, for instance, through low income, and that was a very deliberate way through, as an example, through, for instance, through low income housing tax credit financing projects. Not limited to that, but partnering in those. If you remember, our housing attorney, Dee Weiser, said you don't want to limit it to only LIHTC, but you want to identify those are the types of partnerships that you're looking for, because you're looking at a partnership where you abate tax to achieve the goal of rent reduction or cost reduction for housing. So just wanted to cover those. I think tonight, what we have, our guests here tonight are going to go over a project that, as from a staff standpoint, we're not at a point where we have enough information to make a recommendation, but we do want to gather more information because it meets a lot of these goals that I've just covered. We're talking about a property on 805 West Otley Avenue, currently owned by Family Health West, which was previously an assisted living center. So it's been vacant for a number of years now. A couple of things to point out is it's already zoned for this type of for housing. It was obviously a different type of use, but this is not something that you have to rezone. This is not something, this would actually be an administrative review process for somebody putting a new type of living in this space. The proposal that, and you'll get more detail from them, is to convert this property into workforce housing within the city through deed restriction, local preference, and financial assistance. You've heard about local preference before, and obviously, and they'll get into this a little more detail, but also you've heard where sometimes that's been a desire but not available because of fair housing. But that is when you are tied to state and federal funding, whereas they are looking to go about this a different route. I want to remind you that just as a whole, for achieving these goals, we opted into Senate Bill 123 with a goal of 3 years of, up to, I think our numbers 133 units. We had the Muse at 50 units that is scheduled to open. It's 50 townhomes to be affordable for those households within 30% to 100% AMI. That qualifies for that 123 funding. We have Geode Flats that is seeking, and Muse received a 9% deal with LIHTC deal through CHAFA, or the Colorado Housing and Finance Association. So, and Geode Flats on South Fruita originally had come in for quite a few units. Now they're looking at 68 units in 2 phases with a 4% deal with CHAFA that they are seeking in that next round. And that is for 30 to 80%. So affordability with 30 to 80%. So another deeper dive, because that's typically when you go that deep with on the AMI side to actually have rents that are affordable for those in those area median income levels. It's typically going through something significant like a partnership with CHAFA. Tonight, you're going to hear about one for 62 units seeking under the 100% AMI, which is one of those other target areas that we need, that we see a lot of need from. Anywhere from 60 to 80 to up to 100 is you're fitting into a lot of these categories of workers in Fruita that are not able to live in Fruita. Yeah, it gets even higher, as Councilmember Miller knows. So I'm going to stop talking, but I just wanted to kind of preface that, a little bit of background, since we just kind of squeeze that in as reminders of this. Sometimes there are questions we need. Do we have plans, or do we have strategies? And we do. And I just wanted to reiterate that we have, 3 to 4 significant documents that have been approved or commissioned by the city, or one throughout the valley, but one commissioned by the city, the comprehensive plan and land use code that have been adopted by the city council for 10-year plus plans. Every type of project that comes our way, whether it's economic development or housing, are going to fit different. There's not a cookie cutter recipe to have, like, here's a policy that just meets any type of request. So, but what we look for are the request meeting. Wow.
That's enough.
I'm in me now. No, I'm just kidding, Jeff. The request, but we're looking at the requests meeting what the needs are within the community, are the locations within where we emphasize where those are. This is an infill project. This is also in partnership with our largest employer, and with the ability to do preference. That's where we see a lot of connection to these multiple plans. This is something worth exploring and moving on. I'm going to stop there so they can give their presentation. You can ask tons of questions.
Real quick, I want to ask you just one qualifying thing, just a little bit back on what you were talking about. So from Muse, we have that goal, the 150, that was a mandate from the state, correct?
So we opted into a program, and that if you are able to meet those goals, it allows you to keep seeking after more funding that they make available in future years.
So from Muse, we have 50. That would allot towards that. From Geo Flats, we have 68 that
And that's if these make it through.
Okay, if it happens.
Yeah.
And then if this one happened, that would be 62. So between all of those, we would be over the mark.
It's 130.
Oh, it is 130.
132 or 3,
Okay.
4. 134. Thank you, Dan. But there's nuances. So every time those, there's a table to make sure every unit meets and qualifies. But we did get.
I just
yeah,
wanted to
great
put
question.
that in the background.
Okay.
We're thinking about this.
Well, we will introduce with Headwaters Housing Partners, Adam Roy and Grady Lenkin. And we'll let them, if you want to come up to the podium, and feel free to give your presentation. And we thank you for being here tonight.
Thanks, Mike, for that info. And thank you to the counselors for having us tonight. My name is Grady Lenkin. I'm a partner with Headwaters Housing Partners. We're going to talk to you tonight about 805 West Otley and what we hope to do there. So first, we're going to tell you who we are, what we want to do, why we want to do it, and how we do it. So Headwaters Housing Partners is a workforce and affordable housing developer focused on Western Colorado. We are Western Colorado natives. I grew up in the area. I went to school in Carbondale before living out east and moving home. Past projects span Aspen to Grand Junction. Current projects are in Parachute and Grand Junction. And one thing I just want to stress for you all tonight is that we really specialize in partnering with public entities, both at the local level and the state level. So here's a list of groups that we are currently partnering with locally and at the state level: the Housing Authority in Grand Junction, the Downtown Development Authority in Grand Junction, Garfield County Housing Authority, and then statewide, the Division of Housing, OEDIT, DLG, and CHAFA.
My name's Adam Roy. I'm Grady's partner with Headwaters Housing Partners. Also Western Colorado native, Grand Valley native. I went to Fruita Middle School and Fruita Mountain High School. And I'm just shocked that I'm back home doing projects right now, because the word affordable workforce housing is not in our lexicon, nomenclature until 4 or 5 years ago. And that's true in Grand Junction and Fruita, Parachute, and we're seeing what we call kind of a downstream pressure, what was from the resort communities. It's always been a word there, right? Yeah. And now it's here. Recreation communities, this is where it's desirable to live. We're all facing this new reality. And the state has done an amazing job at coming in very swiftly with some great programs. And I would say the same for the city of Fruita with what you guys have done over a very short amount of time with new comp plan, new land use code, and the housing authority is pretty impressive from where we stand in the different municipalities and jurisdictions we live and work in. So I'm going to talk to you about the project itself. We're not going to go into a deep dive, and we're going to go pretty quick so we can get through at 9 o'clock, but have the material up for more conversation. This project came into our attention over a year ago, and I know others have looked at it and kicked the tires pretty hard on what it could become. And we did the same, didn't have a lot of great ideas. And speaking with Dan over years, and on this project now since spring, we saw some opportunity maybe to do something a little bit different. And so looking at this kind of unique footprint, the history is that it's actually modules that were originally planned. They were still in shrink wrap in the 90s, put out in the oil fields for all the roughnecks on the oil rigs. And then, you know, what happened in the 80s, early 90s, these things just sat. Family Health West purchased them, designed foundations to support them, and they've effectively outlived their lifespan. They're not the code. They're getting pretty beat up and run down. And what we've done is analyzed what could we do with the existing structure of the property, and the foundation is in excellent shape. So our plan is to take off the superstructure, so everything above grade, and reuse all the foundations. It is also the most impactful part of construction today with both cost and environmental impact. And we saw a modularity opportunity where we could reposition the assisted living center that had somewhere up to 96 units at one point in time to a much more current, modern, safe, livable, desirable apartment complex for the workforce of Fruita. This is the existing survey today. It's very kind of odd configuration. And this is our new layout and configuration. You can see in the center, there's a community building. It is the current building that is the community hall and the commercial kitchen. And we've simplified the surrounding structures, again, going down to the foundation and rebuilding up units on top. And again, I think in a very more current, modern, and complementary architecture to the surrounding area. This is the mix of our units planning right now. We are actually in for site plan submittal already. We submitted on Friday. So we are in kind of in good faith moving our process forward to just keep the ball rolling. Family Health West has been an excellent, I'll say partner. They're the seller, we're the buyer, but we're certainly working together on a weekly basis, basically, to kind of talk through this, that, or the other that they may have a lot of institutional knowledge about that we do not. The mix of units is 51 one-bedroom and 11 two-bedroom. There's a reason why, a couple reasons why for that. We are also going to build the interior buildings as two-story structures. We've taken great care to make sure that those interior structures are screened from the surrounding single-family neighborhood. So from that perspective, these outer buildings will still all function as if they're a single-story structure. So very aesthetically different in terms of much more current and modern, but mass and scale-wise very similar to what neighbors are experiencing today. And then the goal is to repurpose the interior building into sort of small community building, but ample storage, workshop, bike tuning, bike wash down, things that people living in an apartment will not have in a garage, but will have access to something on site to make it more functional and livable for the residents. This is a illustrative site plan. You can see a lot of work is going into enhancing the site plan, but also in doing that buffering it, bringing in more strategic landscaping around the perimeters, again, to provide some visual buffer and some hopefully, attractive landscaping as the property relates to the surrounding neighborhood. We're maintaining the footprints. We are maintaining the parking and circulation locations and all the utilities. Another great thing about the project is the utilities are already there. 96 units, the amount of scale is fully fire sprinkled. So all of these things are already done and in place. And we're just basically repositioning them to reuse them for higher and better use today. This is just a quick shot of that single-story architecture where it stands today. We're really excited about bringing in something that's new, livable, and we think going to be very kind of dynamic and aesthetically interesting for that area. And also being very sensitive that it is become more of a single-family neighborhood today, not what I remember it to be. I was also shocked after some years seeing my Little League field that's now a hospital.
Boy, you haven't been back in a minute.
So what we'd like to now show you is why are we doing this? Why are we approaching?
Yeah, so we've really been guided by the question of who is this for? And this is a very text-heavy slide. It was really designed as a leave behind. I can walk you through it. Please don't worry about reading every single word. The way that we approach real estate development and development of housing is wherever we're doing a project, we start from ground zero and we try to understand what are the needs of whatever community we're working in. In the case of Fruita, we've had quite a few conversations, and what we've learned is that there's really a shortage of housing for the workforce. So individuals making, $20 to $35 an hour, folks in their 20s and 30s, maybe early 40s, mostly single people, maybe some couples or roommates. So our friends at Family Health West were kind enough to share some data with us. So if you look at this table in the bottom of the slide, what you will see is that for the mouse works, for people earning between $40,000 and $60,000, which is going to be our target income range, you have a total of 212 employees at Family Health West in that income band, and 1/3 live in Fruita and 2/3 don't. And that really caught our attention. And we've been asking the question and speaking with Dan and others, if you're driving and commuting to a job in a place that you want to live but can't afford to live, and you're driving past 3 or 4 or 5 other jobs that pay you the same amount of money, how long are you going to keep making that commute? And if you can't afford to live where you work, and if that's something you want to do. So this dynamic in particular hurts small businesses the worst. So we've walked around town, spoken to a lot of folks, spoken with the Chamber of Commerce. For employers that have fewer than 10 employees, that don't have the resources of a Family Health West, and don't have HR and the ability to aggressively recruit and place, not having access to a local workforce disproportionately hurts those businesses. The last point that I'll make, and then I'll let Adam take over, is, again, we really, really wanted to focus in on who is this for? And I said it before, and I'll say it again, this is for folks who we envision in their mid-20s up to their early 40s, earning 60 to 100% of AMI, which is 20 to 35 bucks an hour for a full-time job. And we felt, after we studied the housing ecosystem in Fruita, we noticed a couple of things. We noticed, one, that there's really a shortage of one-bedroom apartments. There's a lot of houses that you can rent with friends, rent a room in. There's a number of apartment complexes, although they're very hard to find. And what we saw is that if you are a single 30-year-old working at Family Health West, or working on a business on Main Street, and you're earning 30 bucks an hour, there's nowhere for you to live. So this project would be perfect for you. And then in addition to that, the Fruita Muse, targets 30 up to 100% AMI, but the majority of the units there are 30 to 60% AMI. I think only a few go up to 100. So we really want to fill that gap of 60 to 100.
That's perfect. And follow up on that, we are looking for support from the Housing Authority. I'm actually going to go down below to the outcomes and benefits. Mike did a very good job describing some of the finer points that we can and can't do with different state and federal programs. We don't do any light tech work at all, not because of the restriction, not being able to kind of have preferential treatment for whether it's local workers or an employer type. We don't do it because there's a lot of people doing it in light tech. Grand Junction Housing Authority, you've got another project that's a 4% light tech deal. And those do a great job. They're an incredibly powerful program, but they serve a very specific income strategy. It's 30 to 60% we want to complement. We also don't only want to complement, we want to be able to have greater flexibility with what the project can serve. And by going entirely on a local level, meaning whatever form of support we are able to work out, we can create that preferential treatment. We can create a first requirement that the resident is an employee in an 8.5 zip code. You can make preferential treatment to employers. If a large employer wanted to have a master lease to secure 5 to 10 units, you can do that. Under the local context, you can't do that at the state or federal. Biggest time. You're going a state program or a federal program, you got to plan at least a couple of years if you're lucky, because everything's competitive, to get that funding, to go through the contracting, to get to the state housing board, to get everything done to the point where you actually have the funds available to build a project. And going the local route, we've been under contract on this for a few months, and we already have a site plan. We've been working on a parachute project for almost 3 years, and we're just to the final point of contracting on that funding source from the state division. So there's myriad of opportunities that staying at a local level makes the projects better, more flexible, faster, and I think accommodate the workforce and a targeted workforce that we believe. So what we're coming to here tonight is just to get guidance as council. We can start working with Dan and Mike and staff to start exploring what are the different financial alignments that we can find. My understanding, and I don't know the details, but a tax abatement is a great opportunity. The beauty of the project is that we already have all the infrastructure there. So tap fees and impact fees should be a credit. Should be credited, pre-existing should be credited against additional fees and impact fees and tap fees. So that's a great benefit already there. And then lastly, to hit a targeted income level, we would need some amount of financial support and contribution from the city of Fruita, from the housing authority. I don't know what that funding mechanisms are. I don't know if there's a tax. I don't know if there's existing ARPA funds that were distributed out to every municipality over the last number of years. We don't know if it needs to be a single amount, or if it can be a loan, or if it can be an amount over time, over years. But that's what we really want direction on tonight, to go explore that with your staff, so we can come back to you as for the housing authority, present to you what our proposal is for financial alignment, and I think ultimately partnership with the city of Fruita and Fruita Housing. That's a lot. We have a lot of detail in these slides. If there's any questions that we can answer, whether it's about the design, the planning, or if it's about, you know, the market, what we're kind of finding, what we're trying to target, we appreciate the conversation.
I have a quick question. Previously, like the rooms was a bathroom and a room. In your proposal, kitchen, yeah.
They're gonna, if you look back at the landscape plan, every unit has a front and back door. Everyone has the back of the patio yard. We're gonna have the centralized storage, so you need to store your bike or your kayak or your climbing rack or your whatever in your unit. Fully outfitted, full bathrooms. We're working with an architecture firm in Boulder. They specialize in workforce housing. It's gonna be a great project. Really excited.
How many square feet are these
Yeah,
units?
that's what I wanted to ask.
The one bedrooms are kind of in the mid 500s to 600 square feet. The two bedrooms are in the middle 800s, roughly on average.
And the current parking is sufficient for,
Not as it currently exists today, but we're utilizing those same locations and just increasing the amount. And
Okay.
we will meet the code requirement for those.
Yeah, the current site plan exceeds the required parking that they have.
And just to be clear, these are all rental units. None of these are for purchase.
That's correct. We did explore looking at could some be for sale. It would be a very odd situation, very unique to have 62 units where only a handful are for sale. You'd have to create a condominium plat and a HOA, and you'd have a very disproportionate HOA of all the other units and then the ownership units. We talked to financial institutions, banks, we talked to legal counsel and a builder, condo law in Colorado. Construction defect is very.
it's not friendly.
There are great models out there for affordable home ownership. Try to mix the two together with some rental and some for sale is proving to be kind of a square peg in a round hole. And I think they're arguably not ideal to be an owner in a larger neighborhood with this type of project, because it is a pretty concentrated and shared amenity. Not to say there wouldn't be interested buyers, but we'd love to have another opportunity to have a ownership conversation on another project. There's some pretty interesting things, especially at the state level, for supportive funding to create big down payment assistance and
Indicating that you prefer to go the local way, give an estimate as to when, you know, if things proceeded as you think, how long before the project would be completed? I mean, are we looking at the 5 years or 2 years?
Not a crystal ball right here in front of me to tell you this, of course, but we're in for site plan review. It's administrative. We feel really good about the package we submitted. We have a contractor on board. Our architect is moving fast. We'd like to think that we're in for a building permit later this year, starting construction next year.
Okay.
Besides the buying and selling transactional relationship you have with Family Health West, how else have they collaborated or interacted with this idea or with you guys?
They've been a great ally and advisor of ours, and we've had a number of conversations with Dr. Corey Klein, just to be a sounding board and, you know, work with him as we've been refining our idea, and he's provided great feedback for us so far. We've had conversations about the possibility of additional formal partnership, but nothing has materialized as of yet.
Thank you.
So we're talking about meeting that, the 60 to 100%, that gap there. What are we looking at approximately the rental rates are gonna be? Do you have an idea where you're looking at for these?
It's really going to depend on the nature of our partnership with the Fruita Housing Authority. There's a variety of scenarios where you know, if there's increased contribution, we can have deed restricted rents at lower AMIs. Not as much contribution, we'd have to push it to higher AMIs. So, yeah.
I guess I'm gonna push you a little bit more than that. So say we didn't do it at all. Say we're just totally out. You guys are already invested in this. What do you think your point would be at?
So we'd have two scenarios. One is we would redesign the project, bigger units, higher price point, look very similar to what's the new multifamily coming online in Fruita today. Or more likely, we probably wouldn't do the project.
And if we were, I just want to get a ballpark number. I'm really liking what I'm hearing, so don't worry, I'm not like pushing you away. I would just like some sort of a ball, what we're looking at. What are these people gonna pay for this one bedroom? Where do you see it at? Like, where are you hoping it lands at?
This is a non-binding.
Yeah.
Not finding it all, just to keep the wheels turning a little.
The state kind of describes.
Sure.
As what is the income. So we have, let's say, a tier of different units, some it's 80, 90, 100 AMI, they would all have a different rate governed by the maximum at the state level. Do you have a number?
Yeah, I mean, in a sort of mid-case scenario, you know, we're targeting AMIs in the 70-80% range, which, you know, if you inflate it out 2-3 years at 3%, we're sort of in the 1300s range for a one bed. I don't know the math off the top of my head without looking at the numbers.
No, and that's what I was looking for, just for, you know, in layman's terms, you know, because when we start talking AMI, no, that isn't just populate a number in people's heads. So that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Janine, did you have a question?
Can we get this? This is not the packet that we got, and I really like this. Can we get a copy of that?
You comfortable with sharing this?
It's submitted into the
Okay.
site plan process right now, so
Okay, good.
All right.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, it'll
much
be-
more updated than.
It'll all be put on the website, the whole site plan.
See that for 3 days.
Yeah.
Pre-architecture. What's that?
Yeah, this is much more fleshed out, but yeah.
We can forward the slides. I forgot to mention a couple things, Mayor and members of council. One thing that's always tricky is you all sit in two different bodies, right? Yeah, you're a Fruita City Council, but you also can wear the hat and have a housing authority meeting. Obviously, tonight's a city council meeting. I did talk with the city attorney about that, and typically, having a housing authority, a good example would be Grand Junction, and somebody can come and make a pitch to the city council to start with, and then would need to have further conversations with the housing authority. And that would be the case here. But if you remember working with our housing attorneys, and if you were to have us, if you were to direct us to look into this further and start, what that would mean is exploring what the gap is. So to your question earlier, if we didn't partner at all, you got the answers of what the two alternatives they would look at. If we were to partner, we would start getting a lot deeper into trying to figure out what is that financial gap, and ask, if there's something similar, what our housing authority has done, like a special limited partnership that can waive some taxes, and that's what our housing authority is set up to be. But all those things could land on either group. So it's not all a housing authority. It could be a housing authority thing. It could be a city council thing. So what we would do is start working with our housing attorneys. We would work with Headwaters, and we would try to start narrowing down what is that specific gap that's being asked, and what are the different alternatives for funding, and then coming back with further discussions, which could be in a housing authority meeting for some of those, and in a city council for some of those. But
Starters as council,
Mhm.
really what we need to do as council, say, help us understand council the gap
Yes.
to get that research. So then we can take that research either as council to take a look at, or when appropriate, after understanding that gap and the funding mechanisms, then switch it over to this housing authority, which can actually actuate those changes.
Exactly.
So tonight is purely city council. And the ask is really, are we interested in exploring and better understanding what this gap is?
My question to the rest of the council, is anybody not interested in this? Okay, and
No.
because my next question would be why?
No, so-
Because I think it's phenomenal.
At first glance, love the project,
Yeah.
love the concept of it. I would ask Mike, in the packet, you had a link to the comp plan and the Grand Valley Housing Assessment. Could you kindly just send us a link to the ESP survey
Yes, I'll
as
send
well
you
to
a
help us
PDF
kind of
it.
overlay that to that would be wonderful.
Yeah, we can follow up with, we'll make sure that's on the website too, if it's not, but we'll send that. And then also, we can send this presentation that they provided us, just today.
That would be wonderful. So what I'm hearing from council is we are all in favor of authorizing Mike and staff to start to explore, to work with you guys to help explore what that gap is and what those needs are. Yes?
Yes.
All right. Mike, do you have clear direction on this?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, very, very much.
Fair.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, James, can we just not stir the pot?
They heard Layla. They know.
You don't have it. That's the.
You know,
Real
leopard does not change its spots, all I can say. All right, thank you, everyone. All right, so with that, we're gonna move into Mike, the city manager's report. We'll give him a moment to clear the room. So, thank you very much. Appreciate that,
Yeah.
Grady.
Good night.
All right, so Mike, you are up with the city manager's report.
All right. I just wanted to, Mayor, members of council, just one thing to update. We are partnering related to housing. We're doing a partnership with the city of Grand Junction and related to ADUs. So it's called an ADU toolkit. And this is related to the work we've already done in the past couple of years of creating. We made changes, obviously, to our land use code. We've had previous meetings and discussions about this long before those changes were adopted by public hearing to make it more accessible for people to create ADUs in our city. The city of Grand Junction then did some similar code changes more recently and utilized some of the code changes and some of the wording that we had used. And then if you remember back then, we had an idea where we wanted to create pre-approved plans for ADUs, right? So you could still submit plans if you come up with your own type of ADU design, but to have specific ADUs, accessible dwelling units that already have pre-approved plans, and that would be something that would be a process that would come through and get pre-approved. So with our building department and with the consent, I believe, of Mesa County's building department, City of Grand Junction wanted to work with us and our building department on the same, so that they could have that we could create a set of a few different plans that are just available. And so if you didn't want to go through, I've got to pay for design and I've got to figure out there's these set plans that are already met. And if you go through that, it's a quick process to have them built. Again, it doesn't limit you to those, it creates it. So it was always a goal that we had. And so now we're pretty excited about that. Just wanted to let you know that our building department's helping us out in creating those, but in conjunction with them, that the planning departments merged or came up with this together. And so this is a booklet that is starting to get put, that the city of Grand Junction had started putting together, and now we will be looking at similar things, but this is just a specific one to their toolkit right now. And then just wanted to let you know that we're working on these plans like we.
Few different options, Mike, is it?
Yeah, I don't know how many just yet, but the idea is to have a few different options that
Very cool.
that would be available, just to make that easier and quicker in the process. So
And saves the cost too.
yeah. And then the other thing, and maybe maybe I'll let Amy, if you want to talk about our tour today and your update, but yeah, we had a great, and Andrea, we are the three of us and Ciara and Ammon, were able to, Janie Van Winkle, rancher with Van Winkle Ranch. We actually toured the ranch, and the whole purpose was, she and I have had some discussions for quite a few years about how we can merge our messaging as more educational related to tourism and outdoor recreation, but also the ag uses. And there's so many connections there that people don't realize, whether it's just, she was telling us quite a few stories today, and where these connections are, you don't realize that maybe some of the trails we're using were created by cows, or you don't realize that the recreationists, what they like to do after they finish riding on the trails is go get a burger, and just, but those are just a few. But so Ciara had reached out to kind of get this idea that she and I have talked about for years of just kind of starting to create that better partnership. And we learned a lot, and it was a wonderful time that we got to spend today. But that's all I have for tonight. Thanks.
All right, with that, we'll go into council reports and actions. I will not mix it up like I normally do. I will start with you, James.
I didn't have any meetings, but I have one concern that I wanted to bring up. I've been watching this deterioration of a tree on the pathway to the little salt wash right by Otley.
Oh yeah.
There's an aspen that's, any day could just literally fall.
Yeah.
I'm so aware of it.
We've already, we'll get Dan's out of here, but you want to answer that, Shane?
So we've notified the property owner.
Can you kindly speak into the microphone?
Kindly.
Oh, sorry. This is not long enough.
If you'd like, you can come up to the microphone up front and speak.
There you go.
We were.
There you go.
Good job, Lou.
As soon as I
Up your hires, I knew it.
Helpful citizen.
Thanks, Lou. As soon as I get it turned on, of course. So per our municipal code, we have notified the property owner, and the property owner has 15 days to take care of the tree before we as staff send out a contractor to cut it on our own. That clock started last Friday. I believe we've already scheduled a service if the property owner does not take care of it, but that's kind of where we're at. But yeah, we saw it. First off, we had to refer to our code, and that decision is actually up to the Public Works Director, how to move forward. So Kimberly made that decision last Friday, and we sent out notice then as well. Of course, thank you.
Anything else, James? Me?
Yes, as was mentioned in the recommendations about the rec center passes, and we give out a lot of those passes, and those passes now are out of date and evidently not being kindly accepted when they're taken. So I'm wondering if just until those are used, if we could ask the rec center staff to still accept those that are out, since we have given them as gifts.
Yeah, that's something working on with Mark. With the new process, there became some confusion, and some were not accepting the old ones, but we've talked about, we've given those out just this whole past school year. So we are recording those differently when we give them out in the future, but we're trying to, that should be worked out.
Awesome. Okay.
I'll make sure.
It's this
Thank
useless piece of paper.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right. Oh, how
Okay,
sad.
awesome, thank you. I knew you'd already also heard about that, but I just wanted to ask as well. And then before we even heard about Ash, I was curious about how that had happened and what's the status on Peach and Paper as well. Although I know we're doing a wider look too.
Yeah. Yeah. We did just get a report back for Peach and Paper from SGM, and I can get that so we can present that or share that as well. Going off the top of my head, the ultimate, they went through all the various criteria for a 4-way stop, and And I just read this very recently they went through the different criteria, and only one criteria has to be met for a four-way when it goes through all these. And the only one that was met was the site distance. But they did not recommend a four-way because the site distance can be remedied with the site distance is only being caused by the vegetation. So that creates, so we're still trying to evaluate that and where we bring it. We also have SGM working on a more general, that was just a very specific review of that intersection. So they're working on a more general criteria base for us to go through all. And so we kind of want to get that before we make any final decisions, because that's to kind of take into account some of the nuances of just Fruita specific, kind of like we've talked about in the past related to crosswalks and things like that. I definitely have a note to follow up because I haven't received the report yet myself. So I need to get that from police and engineering related to Ash, because so she's beat me to reading it. So I need to get that. And so I have a note to follow up with them and go over that.
Then the general process for that, when studies are done, it doesn't necessarily come to council anyway. So that's not something that, unless we're just interested.
If we were to adopt a different criteria than MUTCD standards, then yes, we would bring that for presentations, discussions, and the potential of an MUTCD standards are the standards just across the country for.
It's a national study. That's a national standard, not a state standard.
Years ago, we presented an alternative that, for example, years ago we were looking at crosswalks and where we felt like we had some needs for crosswalks, but they didn't technically meet MUTCD standards. There'd be pretty few that would meet. So we worked on through engineering a new criteria that took into account, more what we wanted to add, kind of doing above and beyond what was within the city of Fruita. And we brought that to council at the time, had discussions, and then adopted it. And then that's what we've applied our criteria to when we review crosswalks. So that's what we're looking into right now for the potential of intersections and four-way stops, because most
Fan of that idea.
yeah, because most won't meet.
Local.
Yeah.
But you also have to take into account when they just don't meet the standards, there's reasonings, and sometimes not meeting the standards can cause other issues. So it's not just how you feel. There's a lot of level of detail to
We
that.
can't create a standard that we then say, well, we like it here, we don't like it
Not
here. We have to have
Correct.
that standard across the board and then understand the sometimes unintended ramifications of doing that as well.
Correct. And that's why we've asked a third party to kind of do that review and then give us some recommendations. So we had it for just the intersection, but the bigger ask that we have them working on is for in general, and taking into account. So I don't have more info on that yet, but that is something that we would, with that, it wouldn't be something we would just decide as staff. That would be a change because that we'd have it probably a workshop and then future discussion decisions on.
But like road studies.
Where they would present.
We don't necessarily see that.
We
We didn't necessarily see like peach and pabe or whatever came from that or from ash.
Yeah, typically we go through the studies and determine if there's, during that period of time, if we need to do more study, because sometimes there are nuances during that period of time, but then we get the data and then make a decision internally if it's going, if we're hitting certain speeds too often and those types of things. And then, but it's not just a yes or no. It could lead to different types of enforcement. It could lead to different types of signage. It could lead to different speeds. I mean, there's a number of things that could.
Just on side note, I was in California a couple weeks ago and every intersection, bigger city than us, every intersection had four-way stops and it was beautiful.
Some of us may disagree.
Every single intersection?
Yeah, well, that weren't stoplights. There was
Wow.
four-way stops. And it just was seamless. Like it wasn't backup traffic. It wasn't anything that you expect.
I've had very different experiences.
They're just really nice drivers too.
Interesting.
Anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Rich?
Just had the Transportation Authority meet, basically because of information that Mike and Kimberly gave me. I was able to make a good decision. I believe they just wanted the authority to bargain, get a new supplier for taking care of the transportation in Grand Junction. That's all. But I do have a question about the 28th of this month. I have not heard anything more about our retreat. We set that aside. Are we doing it? Where are we doing it?
Mhm.
What preparations are being made? I guess I just don't know what's happening.
Yeah, so it's the 28th. We set aside, blocked off the calendar, sent out calendar invites from 8 to 5. It's going to be at Our Lady, which was decided at the last council meeting that we had, which is the church just 2 blocks away. And then
Finalizing the agenda.
yeah, an agenda will be coming out, but
I'll be getting more information before the 28th.
you will, but no additional homework than what the mayor already sent to everybody to prepare for.
Oh, I remember your homework. I just didn't know where and when.
Yeah. So we'll add to that calendar invite the detail on that. So
Just so you know, I'm traveling to Glenwood tomorrow to do some training.
Glad you're able to do that.
So we'll see.
Very valuable.
Kind of jealous.
Okay.
Yeah.
great.
Andrea?
So I attended the Planning Commission board meeting on Tuesday, and I was curious to see how the Excel representative and how that CUP application process would happen. The Excel representative requested a continuance. And so anyone that would like to, anyone in the public that would like to weigh in about the Excel underground, above ground issue is welcome to attend at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, September 10th to the next Planning Commission board meeting. Fruita Arts and Culture Board voted on the Heart of Fruita sculptures and the mulberry murals and the bridge mural. However, I did not attend, so I really have nothing to say about that, but I know that they did. I wanted to get everybody's thumbs up or thumbs down about the prospect of pursuing the creative district idea and just seeing where that might lead us.
Said we were going to talk more about that after our retreat.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I just want to make sure. And then fourthly, I became a little excited about an idea I wanted to bring before you. As you know, the Colorado Creative Industries Summit will be actually hosted in Grand Junction on May 1st and 2nd. And I began to think about how interesting it could be if some folks or everyone on council presented as a panel. This would still be up to them to accept this idea. Proposals are due September 2nd. But I noticed we have a lot of creatives on our council, and we have a lot of people that have to work with us too. Creatives, I don't know. Everybody's got to take. But Fruita as a municipality has a pretty strong representation of creatives, even professional creatives. And I thought it could be an interesting proposal to see, especially since it's local-ish. What if anybody was interested in like presenting on a panel or just asking, having people ask questions about how does creativity find expression in a civic space like it does in Fruita? I think we're kind of an interesting mix, heavy in that realm. And I see it as a huge positive. I think it could be a really fun thing to share with other people because this conference will be attended by folks from all over the state. It's presented by OEdit and just an idea.
And is this?
It would be May 1st I know the conference is May 1st and 2nd.
Do you have any idea what day of the
Good
days of
question.
the week that make this go beyond? I wanted to go
Coming
this
out
way.
that way far.
That would be a Thursday and Friday.
I mean, at this point preliminary, I would say yes, I personally am interested. It's a little hard to predict my schedule that
Yes.
far out.
For sure, it is. I just wondered if
And I
it
can
was,
speak
yeah,
as an individual.
Yeah, me too.
it'd be worth seeing what they think about the idea. Okay,
Yeah, it's a proposal, yeah, and see if they'll accept it.
yeah,
We can go from there.
cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool.
Anything else?
Good thought.
Thank you. Nope, that's all for tonight.
All right.
Thank you.
Amy,
Okay. I attended the community hospital update, which was really great. Not as well attended as last year's was, like busting at the seams. I don't know if people were busier this year. But they're still doing a ton of really good work, it was very encouraging. And the projects that they have coming up are really great. The collaborations that they're doing with partners, pretty cool. Emails, did we fix the emails on the website? Some of our.
Oh, I think
emails are-
we do have yours to fix. I still need to tell Ciara that, but there's
Sorry, I was
sorry.
today and I had it in my notes. I was like, if I don't remember.
Yeah, there's
I
a
had-
place where it has a missing T, I think at fruita.org for
Yeah.
amiller@frua.org. So
Yes. Yeah, I would appreciate that. And then Livability Commission, we had a really great meeting. Mark did an update with them on Parks and Rec, and he did a really great job. That was really nice. And kind of starting to dig a little bit deeper on community garden conversations with them, which I think will be really good. Livability, I feel like kind of they need something to like dig their teeth in. Yeah. They kind of been floating the last few months, and which has been nice. We've, been doing some updates and having some, good conversations there, but I think they just need something to really dig their teeth into and do some bigger impact. So that was exciting as well. So yeah, I think that's everything.
Right. First, I want to say thank you for feedback on the process map that was kind of sent out. I appreciate it. I will resend that. There were changes made because of feedback. So thank you. We will start that same process with the attorney. That one's already been started, but then we'll start working on that process with the municipal judge as well. But thank you very much. So that will continue. This week met with the consulate general and the trade commissioner for Canada. So this was our second kind of go around with them. The nice thing was, at least with the trade commissioner for Canada, a lot of what they talked about is they have a lot of Canadian companies that are trying to figure out where to expand in the United States. I mean, as part of what they do. Next time, they promised to come by for pizza and beer. Because all the meetings have been in Grand Junction, but to come spend some time in Fruita to really kind of understand who we are. So as they're talking to companies that may look if there is a logical fit. So looking forward to that when that happens, but it's our second meeting with them. So those relationships are being built. Fruita Chamber meeting is this week. Thank you to the staff over at the rec center for getting the pool
Oh
refilled.
my goodness, yeah.
I was in there on Saturday. It was
Was it-
glorious.
Christine.
It was pristine. It was amazing. So just thank you. That's a lot of work to kind of get that turned around. I had kind of poked my head in a few times as they were doing the cleaning and scrubbing. That's a lot of work. And it was also great to see, if you haven't been there, on the pool deck, all the plywood is down. So you can now walk the whole way around the pool, and you can start to actually see where things are going to happen. So that was exciting. So that's all I have.
We going bowling on?
Oh,
This
thank you.
Oh, that's
Yes.
right. Yeah.
Yes, we are.
6:00 on Thursday.
Yep.
This Thursday.
Yeah.
I had a kid at work today tell me about his bowling. I was like, what is that? Oh. Freeway. Mhm.
Yep.
Oh, I better plug the pastels in the park one last time.
Oh, yeah.
All right, two things. Final Fruita 4th Friday.
Yes.
Plus the first ever pastels in the park And there's still sign up space. Whoever's listening, you should definitely sign up. It's free. And there are cash prizes and there's going to be food trucks and
So that's this.
this Friday.
Do you-
So
Is there a good, even though there's still space, is there still a good turnout for the child?
I think so. I think it seems promising and we're gonna appear as though we're having so much fun that it will not be missed next year, obviously.
I appreciate kind of on events, the schedule for the films in the park, seeing those,
Very cool.
hopefully the community will come out en masse and enjoy those.
I've seen some enthusiasm already over it, and the selection this year is really fun.
Adult children are already.
I'm kind of glad to,
This year.
I'm kind of glad to hear that because I'm like, ooh, cars. I'm like, do I have to rent a kid? Here. All right. Anything else before we adjourn?
I am on the website with council now that you mentioned the emails, and Matthew and Aaron don't have an email, or Andrea, and yeah, Amy's is wrong. So there's several.
There's some updating that needs to happen there.
You and I are gonna get all.
That's right. Well, they still find me. It's
Actually, I do
still
have-
an email.
I do actually have a question, and thank you, because you brought up Excel Energy. And I'm trying to, Mike, can you help me understand with the process that they're going through? And I don't want to go into the details of where they're thinking, where they're not. How are there any issues with council getting involved directly with those discussions? Because the likelihood it may become before council. I hope
Yeah.
that makes sense.
So a conditional use permit is, the final decision is made with planning commission. So if you receive any but an appeal could go to the city council. So if you receive any communications from anybody with comments, it's good to reply to them that you will make sure those comments are sent to the, that they will be put as part of the record of this public hearing, because being a continuance, comments are still able to come in, not just at the meeting. So if you can forward those to me, but I would not engage in further conversation, because that could, if an appeal came to city council, you'd have to disclose that, and potentially that may be simple, but it may be that you'd have to recuse yourself of being part of that appeal. So
General, we're not really supposed to attend those meetings.
Yeah, that was gonna be my question. I thought we.
Yeah,
In the.
not to put you on the spot, but we did have,
So it's fine. I just.
we recently had, just at the recommendation of our city attorney, I think might have even been right before the election. I can't remember when
It's
that
a ways
was.
back, actually.
Yeah, okay.
It was like,
Year ago.
we decided Amy, or not Amy, but just.
That's right.
Have a liaison on.
So there's no council liaison, and we ask that council not attend planning commissions because those recommendations come to planning or to city council, or an appeal comes to city council. So just in the future, it's taking an extra precaution. It's not, it's taking a higher level of precaution, not necessarily, there's nothing that says, for 100% you cannot be.
Candidates or.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then if we receive comments by text, the proper just take screenshots of them. and-
Screenshot it and email it to me. And what I'm doing is we are providing them all to the planning department. And then like the next packet in September, and even the packet of the last, had emails like I had received or other council had forwarded to me, was put in the packet as comment for the hearing. So the person can still come to the hearing and speak, but they can also submit those comments anytime prior to the hearing. And if you receive them, they're treated the same, and you forward them on. And it's not that you can't respond. You can respond and say, I will forward these on to the planning department to be included in the public comment of this hearing. But you may have to say, I cannot engage because I am part of the appeal body if there was an appeal in the future or something like that. You don't have to go that far, but if they keep trying to engage with it, you might want to.
Because of something that may come before council.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes, for me, awkward because they can come and say, hey, I'm for this, I'm against this. as an elected official, what is your opinion on this? And to me, that's just kind of an awkward situation to be able to say, you know, I like this because of X, or I dislike it because of Y.
Yeah.
And that kind of, I struggle with this because it removes me from those direct interactions.
Mhm.
So for me, that's a very difficult balance to walk.
Yeah, and I don't want to play city attorney and trying to answer like how you guys balance that.
But
But-
there's also needs to be and I say this with caution because I'm married to an attorney. There's,
Yeah.
there's the letter. Sometimes you're like, you know, here's what the law says strictly. And from a legal point of view, but that's not, I think there may sometimes need to be discussion about when it's implemented and what kind of those
Mhm.
limits are.
Yeah.
And as counsel, where our comfort level may be. So not to be 100% at risk adverse at times.
Yeah, and I would say like going into that first public hearing, there's a packet, just like a council packet. There's a staff recommendation. There are comments related to the public, related to the staff, and the staff said, we do not, you need to bury these. And so it doesn't mean that'll happen, but like, I mean, that's public. Like that was in the packet that our comments of review were these lines would have to be buried. Now, high voltage power lines, that's a very difficult thing to happen, but it has caused I think that's what caused the continuance. And then, so I mean, those things are, you know, I think it's always good to direct people to read the packet, not just the agenda. The packet's where the information is, right? The packet's where recommendations are, where, you know, analysis is and those kinds of things, to participate in the public hearings, to participate in the meetings. So there's nothing wrong with doing any of that, you know, for sure.
Anybody have anything else? All right, the time is 9:58. We are officially adjourned. Thank you, everybody.